Are they the builder also? Is this a local builder? Out-of-state builder? Did they get TIF financing? We find out, however, if you've paid attention, that there is a large company in Omaha that's sort of behind this. And they won't do one thing without us doing another, which means you have to move the library. But I remember going down here with a brand new camera years ago, taking sequential pictures of all those beautiful big buildings that we blew up and demolished at taxpayer expense for Conagra. Yes, they have a minimal presence, but people do tend to leave town, and then the taxpayers are left holding it. So tread carefully before you vote 6-0, 7-0. Ask some questions, debate it amongst yourselves so the taxpayers can hear some of you that may have doubts about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Other opponents today?
Hi, I'm Marjorie Sturgeon, 1015 North 16th Street. I'm also a member of the CTAC board. I want to start by saying I am an opponent of this proposal in its current form. And I urge the City Council to amend the proposal with the following: that the city will work with the Cable Television Access Corporation and Community Information Trust to include dedicated operating space comprising of a broadcast studio, set storage, and audiovisual editing suites for production of public, educational, and governmental access channels, also known as PEG programming by KPAO, Omaha's public access channel, on Cox 22, 1022 HD, and streaming at kpaoTVOmaha.org. I'm a volunteer member of the CTAC board that oversees KPAO, Omaha's public access channel, which has its next meeting on August 8th. In the lead up to this proposal for a new central library coming before the City Council today, I've seen the debate unfold around the core concepts of information access, government transparency, and opportunities to reduce the digital divide, everything everyone's already talked about in our community. And I can't help but point out that KPAO is all of those things. And not including KPAO in the new facility is a huge missed opportunity. In the Omaha Central Library Project's own community engagement findings, which are posted on their website, they asked stakeholders what spaces and places would support your organization at the library. 44% of those who answered a podcast room. 37% answered a film studio. These answers underpin the value of public access television. Both of those audiovisual mediums can be done right now at KPAO. I would like us to ensure KPAO has a long future serving the Omaha community by bringing it into the fold of these library facility discussions. To be frank, I'm concerned that as cable subscriptions decrease and franchise agreements change, there's a risk public access television could disappear. But imagine a library patron heading over to this new building, which is beautiful, where you can pick up your books, use the computers, 3D print something, and then in the same spot, meet with our awesome studio manager, Mike Wallace, to develop and produce a new program on a topic that interests you. There are libraries around the country with audiovisual facilities and even collaborations with public access television. I can provide a list that I've also shared with the CTAC board and the Omaha Public Library Board. If you're like me and you see the potential of how these two organizations, KPAO and the Omaha Public Library, can join forces and better serve our community, please amend this proposal. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Other opponents today? Seeing none, public hearing's closed. I don't see any lights, but I do have a few questions myself I might ask, and then we'll see if others might have lights on as well. First of all, I want to thank everyone for their testimony today and providing that overview. I think that was helpful to our understanding, and certainly an impressive building that's being proposed here and discussed here in partnership with philanthropy. Ms. Jacobson, I think I might have a couple questions for you first. It may also be for Rebecca as well, but we'll see which one you prefer to handle the answers here. So this agreement is between the city and what's called Community Information Trust. I'm not sure there's widespread knowledge about Community Information Trust or who they are. Can you just describe who it is and who the board members are and that sort of thing?
Right. So Heritage created Community Information Trust. It's a related organization. It's also a nonprofit organization. It's called a related organization because all the board members are Heritage board members. So, but it was developed in order to develop due space. And so Heritage will be responsible for executing the project itself, and Community Information Trust will will continue to be responsible for due space. But then Rebecca, as the CEO of Community Information Trust, will also be engaged, obviously, with the visioning for the project, as she's sort of our technology expert and representative there. So it's really it doesn't look pretty, but it like kind of keeps things clean as far as how things are functioning rather than running everything through Heritage. It's a separate independent entity, and people would give their gifts to Community Information Trust through the campaign. So.
And there are board members of Community Information Trust, right?
Who are also board members of Heritage, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a, do you want to?
Yeah, you could find that on the 990. It's Mike McCarthy, David Slassberg, Karen Linder, and I sit on that board as well as the president of Heritage.
Okay, thank you. And then, as was discussed a little bit in pre-council today, and there are a few comments along these lines today here as well. Usually when there's a complicated redevelopment agreement like this, there is some pretty specific provisions in terms of what each party will do, and there are some of those in here that I wanted us to talk about for a minute. But one that came up this morning was the amount being raised for this project. This document does conceive of $20 million being contributed by the city in 2024 and 25 for what I think has been expressed as a project that's for a total of 135 million or thereabouts. From our conversation this morning, that may be going up and hasn't been totally decided yet. But my question along those lines is, to the extent you're comfortable talking about that today, sure, and expressing an amount you think you're going to raise, yeah, that would be of interest because there's not a total number in the document today.
Right, yeah, and we're still figuring that out. We hope to have that final number, within the next few weeks, what our fundraising goal is going to be. It's looking like it's going to be at least $140 million in total and potentially up to $150 million. And I'll say that budget includes, in addition to the building itself, it also includes, significant technology investment. We've got this, beautiful garden and landscaping that we're going to design, probably children's play areas within the building. So there's a lot of stuff outside of the, construction contract that's also included with that. And then, as I mentioned, we also want to fundraise for reserve for operating that would fund a lot of this due space technology in the library, so that we can make sure that funding, which would be above and beyond current library commitments, is there from the beginning.
And so the city's 20 million would leverage approximately 120 or 130 million dollars in private funds.
Exactly, it'll leverage 120 or 130, and it's all to be fundraised. So we would launch the project. We do have commitments from a lot of the large foundations, but we haven't. I guess we don't have formal commitments. We have a lot of the large foundations have said that they're very interested, they're very passionate about this project, and they'll do something. But until we get the approvals and the commitments from all the different entities, we're not going to formally ask for pledges. So all of that fundraising work is going to happen over the next year, along with the next phases of building design. And our goal would be to fundraise at least 85, hopefully 90% of our goal before we break ground next summer.
Mm-hmm. And there is a provision in here that talks about July 1st, 2023. Is that sort of the goal, to have all the funds in hand?
At least 85 or 90%, so that we know that we've got that commitment made, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your organization has a really good track record of getting major projects done, but it's that point at which, if it's not, this agreement could be reversed by either party.
Yes, yeah, I think there's something about that. Isn't there something in the document about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Kuzi, do you want to talk about that provision?
Matt Kuzi, Law Department. There's two provisions in the contract. It's on page 3 of 6, number 3, that allow for a termination. The first is there will be a number of things that the council will be asked to look at and adopt, which would be a development agreement, a merger agreement, some resolutions, and things of that nature. If those fail to pass by council, the agreement would, between the city and Heritage, would be void. As to specifically to the financing, the contract does say that by July 1st, 2023, if CIT or Heritage has determined that is unable to raise the funds necessary to fully finance the project, and that then we are therefore notified by them that they're unable to fully finance the project, the agreement would be terminated at that point. So there's two ways this agreement would be terminated, and those are the two contingencies.
Okay, thank you. And I think the last question I have for you is, there's also a provision that talks about, should this come to pass and should this be approved, the integration of DoSpace Technology Library into the current library system. And in our conversations, I think that does involve North and South Omaha's libraries branches, right? Are you prepared to talk about that a little bit, or Rebecca maybe? Or?
Well, so we're still in conversation with OPL about where DoSpace might be located during construction, but we want to make sure that we're continuing the services that a lot of Omahans have come to depend on, and because we're looking to, integrate DoSpace services with OPL, it would only makes sense for DoSpace to operate within branches. So that hasn't yet been finalized, but we are, in conversation with OPL about potentially having DoSpace sites, DoSpace, I guess we call them satellites, or DoSpace satellites, within at least 2 of the branches. So
okay.
During construction and hopefully ongoing if this all goes well. So yeah.
And those would be two good branches to do that in, I think.
I think so too.
All right. Thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge Ms. Sturgeon's remarks too. I know we've talked, and I think you've talked with other council members as well. I think there is a great possibility here to incorporate public access in the model. A lot of cities do. And we are in conversation, several council members are, with Cox Communications about that. And we see public access TV continuing to be very important to our community and in that potential agreement, and are sort of having a 3-way conversation now about how that can proceed and improve the current environment in where you're operating, which could use some improvement, right? But I do want to say, as long as you're here, that you'd be surprised how many people do watch these replays and do watch them live. So it is an important access point for the community to see what local government is doing.
Yeah.
I saw you get up. Did you want to address that?
Yeah, can I address that? Hi, Marjorie. So I'm a huge...
Rachel, just your name again for the...
Yeah, it's Rachel Jacobson again. I'm a huge fan of public broadcasting. I actually worked at WNYC in New York, and I love that idea. In conversations with the library and DoSpace, I think that there is, as you saw in the findings, there is the potential for a podcast studio, there is the potential for video space, and we want to create as flexible a space as possible so that we can, so that there can be the potential for OPL to facilitate partnerships like that. And so even though it's not like a solidified partnership at this point, I don't think that means that it's, not possible for the future.
Thank you. And then maybe the last couple of questions I have, and I see there are some lights on. I wanted to engage probably either Ms. Marlene or Mr. Curtis on a couple of provisions about the ongoing operational support paragraphs in here. I think that's a really important part of this discussion. And so this document conceives of, should this library be built and should it be then donated to the city of Omaha, that the current library budget remains at least above what they're calling a baseline in 2022 right now. So I guess my question either to Ms. Marlene or to Mr. Curtis is what is that baseline right now that we would be building from? She's on mute. Okay. Whoever wants to take that question?
I'll take this. Steve Curtis, City Finance. I don't know the exact number. I want to say it's about 18, 19 million, somewhere in that range. And then it is going to grow, even though we don't have the budget finished yet. It'll probably grow by as much as 10% into 23, simply because we'll have other facilities that we're taking care of, the one at 84th and Frederick and the one at 1401 Jones.
Okay. So this document reads 2022, so that baseline is probably 18 or 19 million this year in the 2022 budget.
Yes.
And then it says it would need to, over the years, increase in a ratio that's similar to, the overall budget growth. And that's typically been 3 or 4% when we talk about the general fund. Is that generally what your understanding would be in terms of what that growth would need to be?
Generally, the city's various departments have grown in the 3 or 4%, probably for quite a while now, at least the last 6, 7, or 8 years. We've kind of told the library folks that even though we'll let them grow at least at that percent, we'll all kind of agree as a group that we'll have to do what we need to do to fund that library properly.
Because departments can range from 2% to 27% in any given budget year, right, in terms of growth. So I think it's important to have that understanding. And as one who thinks the library has been traditionally underfunded, I think it's important to have this conversation so that if we are taking on a substantial new asset, other library branches or the other libraries in our system aren't suffering, there's not supplanting going on. And I know that's definitely the expectation of donors when they make a contribution or a gift like this. Ms. Marlene, did we get her off mute okay? If you want to address those questions, or I guess the specific question I have for you is, you don't have a concern that any other library branch is going to suffer as a result of this agreement going forward financially?
No, certainly not. Any changes that we make in our facilities, that has a ripple effect across our whole system, usually in a positive way. This central library project will be very similar in how we're able to manage collections through the ASRS. And the effect that we'll have across the system was we'll be able to store more back titles that we would love to keep now, but just don't have the space for. By using the ASRS, that'll free up some collection space on the floors so that we have more programming space. There'd be more of an ability to have pop-up programs or have more people in the facility at a time for things, since we're not going to be devoting as much floor space to collections. We will always keep our popular collections. This just gives us a chance to curate things more. And the commitment from the city, the commitment from the mayor to increase our staff in the next year and provide funding for us to effectively open the downtown branch, it is more than adequate to get us started, and we are really looking forward to the work we'll be doing.
Thank you. And conversely, we don't know exactly what we're committing to in terms of what it will cost to operate the new library, right? But that work's underway and what those performers might be?
Yes. Yes, that work is currently underway. We have another meeting this week to talk specifically about that.
Okay. The last question I have, which is probably the most frequent question I get about this project at this point, which is why 72nd and Dodge? And I was going to ask that question of proponents today, but I think Tom, in his opening remarks, addressed that very directly and pretty eloquently. As one who's lived in other communities where a downtown library is really important and significant, and one who likes the concept of a downtown library, I do think you addressed that question pretty well here today, and why it is philanthropy and others have, and the library system have identified this general area as the location, and I know that's been part of the library board's strategic plan, I think, since 2017. But I will say, should this move forward, one thing we all need to be working on is pedestrian safety at 72nd and Dodge. For those that are coming to the library, those that are coming to a redeveloped crossroads, as Tom said, the heart of our city. All right, thank you. Mr. Palermo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. a lot of great questions, so I don't have to ask half of them now. As we move forward with this central library project, I will say, unlike other projects, I've seen and heard the drawings about the project well in advance that I thought as it continued to move forward, including with the discussion today that we heard from people. But some of the key words I took out of there was partnership, commitment, engagement, trust, dedication. Ultimately, this is what this agreement will bring with us, with the commitment from the city of Omaha to this project. But as we move forward with this project, because there's so many moving pieces, we know there's a skyscraper going downtown. We know we can say that this will now be obviously the central library. We've moved a library. But what's most important is we can't forget about the existing libraries we have, because they're all going to work together. I know this is the WOW project, and the reason I bring this up and I say this, Laura, are you still off of mute?
Yes.
Let me ask you about the 14th and Jones branch that I publicly felt and know was rushed, about the timeline for that being open on time. Is that going to happen?
We don't have a final timeline yet, but we have been looking at interim space so that we will not have an interruption in library services downtown.
Okay, that's great to hear, because this all goes together, where these library services are so important to everybody. We cannot forget the existing buildings we have, or the funding that we have within the city for these buildings as we move forward. I'm trying to keep on topic with what we have in front of us today, but ultimately what we have in front of us today is because the moving around of libraries we have. So I'm going to be supporting this. There's no doubt about it. But we can't forget about the libraries we have. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harding, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tom, if I could have you come up just for a second. And I know this has kind of been covered a little bit too, but I saw when Marjorie was up speaking, I saw you kind of nodding your head a little bit too, and Rachel had said some things about their space, and I just wanted to give you the opportunity to remind people that we're not here today to approve a plan. This is all conceptual. You've had, charrettes and workshops and input, but I just wanted to give you the opportunity maybe to talk about the conceptual idea of where we are at this point.
Yeah, I mean, if you consider the phases of a traditional architectural or building process, we've just completed schematics. So we've only done concepts and schematics. Design development still needs to be will be undertaken if the project continues to find favor, and then we'll go through contract documents, and then ultimately there's the building process that'll be another part. The other one that was exciting is that I think that she was very eloquent in pointing out the engagement with the community, and all of those parts and elements that she was talking about are ones that we are currently engaging in the conceptual design to include the type of program that would help in that capacity. So.
But also, in addition to that, and I'll kind of pull in some of Rebecca's comments about, how things have changed so dramatically as it relates to technology and delivery of information over the last few years, is that within what you're building, you have to make sure that you have some flexibility in that to make those changes. As 2 years from now, when a building might be coming online, how much might change by then too?
It was a number of the things that we took when we visited. So we visited sites in Norway, in Canada, in Calgary, and then here in the United States. And all of those were set up with engineering and electrical systems that would allow for the ability for the library to transform over time. The intention is the building is a 50-year building, so that the idea that it is set up so that not only is the majority of it a very flexible, and we tried to limit the amount of partition space, or actually fixed walls that need to be there, to allow Laura and Rebecca and their staff to be able to customize it in the way that they need. But those areas that are specific to the needs of broadcasting or the ability to do that have been incorporated into the concepts that are currently on the drawing board.
Okay, thank you. Thanks,
Yep.
Tom. Just a couple other points, and I know that the vote isn't until next week on this, but I loved in Laura's, Marlene's comments about, and kind of paraphrasing, but that the goal is to meet the needs but exceed the expectations. And I think that's really, and this kind of ties into some of the comments and Council Vice President Palermo's comments about the whole library system, is that, you know, we have had comments about maybe the libraries not being funded to a level that that we should expect in our community. And I think this gives us that jumping off point, that opportunity to make the system that much better. I mean, we are going to have a state-of-the-art, 150 million plus facility, main library at the not the heart of the city, but the soul of the city, as Tom said. But have that be the heart of the library system, knowing that the investment and how the other branches will work with that system are really what's going to improve our whole library system. And that's such a great asset for the city of Omaha. And I will take a little note. President Festerson, you said that Heritage has a fairly good track record. Laura, you don't, we don't have to have Rachel come up, but I can't think of a project where Heritage said we're going forward on that didn't get completed. So having said that, I talk a lot about the public-private partnerships, and much has been said about that here today as well too. And it's really how we grow our city. We have an incredible philanthropic and charitable community that's willing to invest in our community. They expect the city of Omaha to be a partner in that, and I'm very willing to do so, especially, and I'll bring up the last project that we've kind of mentioned a couple times today is the Riverfront project. If I can take $1 and get $7 in return off of that investment, I will do that every single day. And that's what we did for the Riverfront project. The city's committed to $50 million in a $400 million project. What we're being asked here today is to make a public commitment of $20 million on $150 million, and the math is essentially the same on that. That's about 13%. So $1 to get $7 in return. Again, I would do that all day long, and for what will result after that being an improved library system, state-of-the-art, and probably the envy of most cities in the country, I'm signing up all day long. Thank you.
Thanks. And if I said fairly, your criticism was fair. Mr. Bagley, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. In the conversation we've had on this project that's been going on for a while, I've been at several meetings, and if you go to the website, omahacentrallibrary.org, that's great information there, and it's when you see the wow factor of the 72nd Dodge site, it really is beautiful, the work that's been put into it. But I don't want to take away from what's already been said. I'll reiterate it because I think it's important for people to know the things I took notes on and have heard in prior meetings. It's going to strengthen other libraries in our city. The staffing is going to increase to meet the demand. In fact, as a organized labor guy, you like to hear that they're going to raise the wages of people. They're going to be doing this work and recognizing the work they do. Important things for the dignity of those workers. That other libraries are not going to suffer, I think that's very important to say. And I know in our library meeting with council members Rowe and Harding and I this morning with Laura, if you can comment briefly even on, I don't want to forget other libraries, Councilman Palermo mentioned that, we don't want to forget about our other locations in some underserved communities or other parts of the city. The Willa Cather, we talked about that, Laura, this morning. Can you just repeat kind of what we talked about, what's going to be going on there in August?
In August, we'll be installing new carpeting, and that will require probably a 2 to 3 week closure to get that work done. And we were able to coordinate with DOTComm to get wiring installed at the same time so that we can also upgrade the phones from analog to VoIP.
Thanks, appreciate you repeating that, and that's technology, things that are gonna be addressed there. And I know the 72nd Dodge site with the Orbit line and transportation, and Councilmember Festerson made a good point on the pedestrian safety. There's things that'll be looked at there, and when this project, if it gets off the ground and goes forward, that those are the things that we'll keep our eye on. And lastly, the 1401 Jones site, we went through that several months ago, and we don't want to forget that that's going to be serving our community in the future, whatever that looks like after 5 years. We don't ever want to forget, we want to have a great downtown library that'll take care of people and serve the needs of people down in several of our districts that are close to that. So I'll definitely be supporting this, and I appreciate the effort that's been put into this. A lot of information's been out there, and I think this is a great project for 72nd Dodge, but again, other libraries are not going to suffer from this, as was put on the record today. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we continue, can I just request that there's a fairly loud bag of chips in the back there. It's a bit distracting up here. If we could maybe step out if you're going to continue snacking there. Okay. Ms. Johnson, you're recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I would like to thank the Heritage Foundation for engaging the City Council in their project that will be at 72nd and Dodge. They did an outstanding job in communicating their efforts and their intentions on bringing something to Omaha, Nebraska for the good of Omaha, Nebraska. Secondly, I would like to thank or acknowledge all of the opponents for coming today and exercising your fundamental right, which is also known as democracy. I also would like to note that while this project is very unique and very good for the city as a whole, I have to make a note that people in District 2 will still have some challenges enjoying this wonderful, amazing opportunity due to the lack of public transportation to those areas going north and south. But when I look at the project itself and what it gives to the whole community, again, I would have to say that this is great. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rowe, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to echo what Mr. Begley said. Be sure to look at omahacentrallibrary.org. Mr. Harding and Begley and I were able to serve on the team that helped put this package together, and I wanted to give a shout out as well to the Margaret Sullivan team. They did a fantastic job of engaging the community from all across the city, from every district, to get input on what the expectation was for a new central library, and I think they knocked it out of the park. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Margaret and her team, and to the rest of the team that put in so many hours of work with Tom and people at Alley Pointer and just across the board. So thank you for all your efforts on that work.
Thank you. No further lights. I'll just thank everybody for being here with us today, and thank you for your work on this project. Next item, please.
Next item is item 6, the preliminary plat for Evergreen, and the applicant has requested this item be withdrawn.
Is there a motion to withdraw? Roll call.
Johnson. Yes. Melton. Yes. Palermo.
Yes.
Rowe. Yes. Bagley. Aye. Harding. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 7, a resolution to approve the revised preliminary plat for Coventry located northwest of 204th and Harrison Streets. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing and vote on number 7 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Johnson.
Yes.
Melton. Yes. Palermo.
Yes.
Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 7 is approved, 7-0. Item 8, a resolution to approve the preliminary plat for Legato located northeast of 204th and Harrison Streets. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing and vote on number 8 is today. Proponents, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the council. My name is Mark Johnson. My address is 11440 West Center Road. Appearing today on behalf of the applicant, just here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any other proponents? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 8 is approved, 7-0. Item 9, a resolution to approve the preliminary plat for Calarosa located northeast of 216th Street and Mount Michael Road. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing and vote on number 9 is today. Proponents, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Brent Beller, 1140, here on behalf of the applicant, here for any questions on this initial preliminary plat.
Thank you. Any other proponents? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 9 is approved, 7-0. Item 10, a resolution to approve the preliminary plat for Burscheid subdivision located at 24645 Pacific Street. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing and vote on number 10 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 10 is approved, 7-0. Items 11 through 14 can be considered together for Daybreak located northeast of 192nd and 4th Streets. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. Items 11 and 12, ordinances to rezone this property from AG District to DR District and R4 District. Item 13, a resolution to approve the final plat. Item 14, a resolution to approve the subdivision agreement.
Public hearing and vote on items 11, 12, 13, and 14 are today. Proponents, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, Mark Johnson, 11440 West Center Road, here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any other proponents? Seeing none, any opponents?
Donnie Johnson, Johnson Equestrian Foundation, North Omaha Concerned Citizen Foundation, 4928 North 52nd Street. Now, this here on 192nd, us baby boomers has been taught we don't rob Paul to pay Peter. And we keep seeing all this annexation of residential property going towards Elkhorn. So is this 192nd Northeast on Fort, which is moving into the area where we want to be, Bennington, Washington County, and Elkhorn. Now, we talked to Mayor Fay when he was mayor. He did get some land, but he used it for the city. Now, you all folks, you know that Nebraska was arguing for years, no casinos. But they finally passed it. Like surrounding states are saying yay to medical marijuana. Us baby boomers want to move on the outskirts of the city and look at this opportunity if it comes forward. But you guys keep building houses, more houses, and even Marty Schubert in the planning department said, look, we got to replace those jobs from the meatpacking plants. No one has been addressing that, but keep building the houses. So when are they going to readdress this, look at this whole process, especially us baby boomers? We don't believe in robbing Paul to pay Peter. We believe if they do finally pass this medical marijuana, which Nebraska's going to do it, they were just down in the unicameral who were screwing things up, like they moved the state fair to Grand Island because of the football program.
All right, let's stay on topic to 192nd Street,
Well,
please.
can you also tell us when are you folks going to talk to USDA and move them from Fremont to Omaha, and then start looking at some of these baby boomers who want to move on the outskirts, like the library that's coming forward. It's for the next generation. Like technology is beyond the technology you folks are talking about. Like the library down there, it's obsolete. So what we're saying to you folks, can you start looking at some of these USDA programs and the Peace Corps programs? That's what we want in North Omaha. And if you want to continue building houses and annexing this new land, Elkhorn and all that stuff, go ahead and build houses. But we need jobs. That's what we're complaining about, jobs. And that right now, that medical marijuana is the only thing that we're looking at for jobs. Thank you.
All right. Any other opponents today? See none, public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Johnson. Milton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 15, an ordinance to rezone property located at 2106 South 42nd Street from R4 District to R5 District. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing and vote on number 15 is today. Proponents, please. Proponents?
Thank you, Tim Bennock, 3647 South 44th Ave. Thank you, Council President, members, for the opportunity to speak today. As a sole owner and applicant, I'm requesting to rezone an empty lot at 2106 South 42nd Street from R4, single-family residential, to R5, urban family residential. The area of 42nd and Francis is currently in largely mixed-use area. To the east of across 42nd, you have Heartland Family Services. To the north, across Francis Street, you have a multi-family apartment building. And then you have multiple duplexes that go south along 42nd. And further, I'd like to emphasize that this request is in conjunction and it aligns with the City of Omaha's future land use plan. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other proponents on number 15? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Mr. Bagley, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. Mr. Bennock, can you come up for a minute, please?
I'm sorry, are you an opponent? Yes. Okay, please, I didn't see you back there. Please come up. I closed public hearing, but I'll recognize you. And then your name and address.
Scott Swancutt, 2113 South 43rd Street. My concerns are the same as they were when we came before the planning department. And I just, when I pulled up the, I don't know what you call it, but the agenda for today, sorry, I'm nervous. They state that, and the planning department said that from R4 to R5 makes no difference. But his land isn't wide enough that it's, that according to what the planner wrote, to put the duplex on that property. And still have concerns about the drainage that's gonna happen right now. I mean, just this year with the storms and the way the alley got messed up before, I mean, the drainage has been horrible, the erosion's been bad. And if he's gonna use everybody's backyards and basements as a storm drain, what concerns me is his plans didn't change at all between May and now. So, I mean, the same issue is still there. That's my concern.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bagley, the floor was yours.
Thanks, Mr. President. And was it Scott? I'm sorry, is that?
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate you being here today. I spoke to Mr. Bennock, if you want to come up, Tim. There was a letter in opposition in addition to what Scott just mentioned today. I had a conversation with Mr. Brian Nickel, who can't be here today, but I had a good conversation with him this morning in regards to the letter he sent. And I won't read the whole letter, but basically it was, I'll just read a sentence. I request the City Council require the duplex owner and builder to fashion the finished alley and driveway to drain rainwater away from my property and our neighbors. And he owns a property at 2105 South 43rd Street. So what he was asking for going forward, this is a rezoning only today, obviously, but Tim, when you go forward with the process, if you start building this, are you willing to talk to the neighbors as the owner of this property you want to build to address any issues they have with water runoff?
Thank you, Councilman Begley. Absolutely. I live in the neighborhood. I live on 44th and Grover. I work on 42nd and Grover. I'm invested in the area. I want to be happy, and I want my neighbors to be happy. And concerning the lot is not wide enough. If you vote yes today, that just gives me the opportunity to go in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals and discuss that issue further. And then the zoning of R5, it does maintain a maximum impervious coverage of 60%, and the proposal is well below that. And it is, I don't plan on touching the alley. That will remain grass. But it is important to have the driveway in the backyard to keep the arterial street of 42nd, keep the traffic flowing safely. So it is important to have the driveway in the backyard, but the concrete driveway will butt up to a grass alley that will not be touched.
Okay.
Thank you.
And again, going forward with Mr. Nickel or Scott that was here today, you have no problem having conversation with them, because neighbors don't want any flooding, obviously, and I can certainly understand that, and I know you appreciate that. So you live close by here, you don't live in California or Seattle or Florida. You're available right here, so any conversation need to be had. Are you committed today to have those with the neighbors to make sure any of their concerns are addressed and you talk to them about it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Like I said, I want to be happy, and I want my neighbors. Yeah, I'm invested in the area. I want my neighbors to be happy.
Okay, thanks. That's
Thank
all
you.
the question I have, Mr. Bennett. Thank you.
Thank you. No further lights.
And I'll make a motion to support this.
Motion and a second. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 15 is approved, 7-0. Item 16, an ordinance to rezone property located at 3106 South 3rd Street from R4 District to R5 District. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing and vote on number 16 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Motion to approve.
Second, roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 16 is approved, 7-0. Item 17, an ordinance to rezone property located at 10935 Mockingbird Drive from CC District to GI District. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing and vote on number 17 is today. Proponents, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Frank Bevins. My address is 20455 E Street, Elkhorn, Nebraska. This is my property, so I'm here with my architect to answer any questions as needed.
Great. Thank you. Any other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Motion and a second. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 17 is approved, 7-0. Item 18, an ordinance to rezone property located at 10435 North 84th Street from AG District to DR District. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing and vote on number 18 is today. Proponents, please.
Sophia Starsick with Fraser Martis Architects, 1005 South 76th Street, here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any other proponents? Seeing none, any opponents?
Donnie R. Johnson, the Johnson and Question Foundation, North Omaha Concerned Citizen Foundation, 4928 North 52nd Street. Again, Mr. Fredrickson, this is changing agriculture district to development, and we're fighting for survival in North Omaha, and we're looking at down the road, they're gonna be passing this state of Nebraska, medical marijuana, and you guys giving up all the land, and you won't even annex the land. I talked to the Blair County Commissioner, and they asked me, why do I want land put over in Douglas County? I said, because you folks in Washington County act like those folks in Washington, D.C., and we can trust the people in Douglas County. But if you guys keep giving up the land, and then when they do pass the law, how are we gonna grow? Are we gonna be able to grow medical marijuana in the city when they pass the law? So you should keep this in mind as y'all move forward, that this is gonna happen. Like the casinos finally came, this is gonna pass. If you could look into the future, that unicameral down there, when they get rid of that governor we have, that he ain't doing nothing for the eastern part of the state, I hope the new governor does, because I ask them all the time, when are you gonna do something for the eastern part of the state? They don't have no answer. The answer for us is that we have to look in this process and look forward. When they do pass this, all the land around here that we're trying to get, we need the USDA and the Peace Corps to participate in some programs in North Omaha to help us so we won't have to rob Paul to pay Peter. This is what we're trying to get in front of you folks as we move forward. And hopefully these things will make some sense down the road. Like that library down there, I knew it was obsolete when they built it. Our school teacher took us down there.
So Donnie, we're talking about a rezoning at 100 on 84th Street, right?
I'm looking at all that land. The land that when you got annexed Elkhorn.
Okay, got you.
Now you remember that land? Do we have to buy on the other side of Elkhorn to grow crops, or do we be on this side of Elkhorn, the east side or the north, or what is it, the west side? Because Elkhorn is annexed to the city now, and if you go into Bennington, there's land there.
All right, can I have you summarize about the rezoning here?
Yeah. Would you start looking at the process of bringing the Peace Corps into our programs in North Omaha and the USDA in Fremont? Call them and tell them we want an office here, and then we'll get some land. The main bottom line is, Mr. President, your Benson district is doing well. We're starving in North Omaha, and the reason why is because there's no jobs. And we're saying that there is a job. Surrounding states are saying yay to medical marijuana.
All
Why
right.
Nebraska saying
We're
nay?
not talking about medical marijuana,
Okay.
Donnie, but thank you for your testimony. All right.
Well, you have one
Any other
today, sir.
opponents on number 18, I'm sorry. Seeing none, public hearing is closed. I will just ask, since you're here, this is a residential addition we're talking about, right, to this?
Correct. There's already a home on the property. We've received an impact study for this, if there are any questions on that, but it is just to allow for a main level bedroom to be on the split level home so that someone could age in place.
Of a current single-family house?
Correct.
Right. Thank you. Is there a motion? Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 18 is approved 7-0. Item 19, an ordinance to amend the boundaries of the MCC district to incorporate into that district the property located southwest of 192nd Street and Grant Avenue. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing and vote on number 19 is today. Proponents, please.
Kyle Hazy with ENA Consulting Group, 10909 Mill Valley Road, representing the applicant. I'll make myself available for any questions the council might have.
Thank you. Any other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 19 is approved 7-0. Item 20, an ordinance to amend the boundaries of the MCC overlay district to incorporate into that district the property located at 5203 and 5213 Leavenworth Street. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing and vote on number 20 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 20 is approved 7-0. Item 21, an ordinance to approve a major amendment to PUR overlay district located southwest of 44th and Douglas Streets. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing and vote on number 21 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 22, an ordinance to amend the boundaries of the ACI district to incorporate into that district the property located at 2602 North 24th Street. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing and vote on number 22 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 22 is approved 7-0. Items 23 and 24 can be considered together for property located at 5100 South 93rd Street. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. Item 23, an ordinance to rezone this property from R3 district to R4 district. Item 24, an ordinance to amend the boundaries of the MCC overlay district to incorporate this property into that district.
Public hearing and vote on number 23 and 24 are today. Proponents, please.
Good afternoon. Joe Dana with Lamper Nearson, 14710 West Dodge, on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you. Any other proponents? Seeing none, any opponents? Please come down.
I do apologize for before, sir.
That's okay.
No, it's not. It's not. It's
Hopefully the chips were good.
Okay. Just one question was,
Your name
if
and
there's-
address, please, for the record.
Is there anything I could say that would stop the rezoning from 3 to 4?
Well, you need your name and address for the record, please.
I'm sorry, 5022, Jeff Stein, 5022 South 93rd Street, Omaha, Nebraska, 4th house down from the Mockingbird Grade School.
Okay. And you're here as an opponent to number 23 and 24?
It's hard to say because, I'm not against it per se, but I just think this is the horse is pushing the cart in front of it because, you know, you guys are already building, you know, wonderful school and, you know, gonna do some wonderful stuff there, but now you're asking me whether I can go from 3 to 4, and you've already are in the process of building a facility that's gonna do that anyways, and now you're asking me for permission. I was just confused. Is it me? It could be, you know, but don't you really ask first whether or not this should be rezoned to 3 to 4, rather than, you know, you're building a 4 facility, and now you're asking me to say, do I object? I apologize. I don't know if I do or not. I'm just a little upset about the, you know, the process. If you were gonna do this and go from, you know, 3 to 4, you should have done that first, not while you're already building the 4th facility. And so I'm just making a statement. I apologize. I don't mean, you know, if I'm wrong.
I got you. We'll have the applicant address that maybe here in a second.
Okay, thanks. You have a good day.
Thanks. You can stick around if you want to. Any other opponents on these items? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Mr. Palermo, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Applicant, if you could come back up. Sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Certainly, yeah. Joe Zdina with Lampernearson, 14710 West Dodge.
Nice to meet you.
You too.
Tell me about the process of how you got to this point.
Sure.
On the agenda.
Yep. So we had several meetings with the city staff. The item 24 was requested by the city just because it kind of increases the aesthetics of the building that they're going to be building, the Ralston Public School. So Ralston Public Schools is the applicant. And then we found through doing multiple school projects, you're usually operating in a residential district. And if we can increase from an R3 to an R4, it gives us some flexibility, say for instance, for a pre-K addition in the future, not to have to come back and rezone. It allows us to build and not exceed those zoning coverages for impervious or building coverage and otherwise. So we kind of look to the future a bit so that we can avoid having to come up multiple times. R3, I mean, we could certainly, we've seen elementary schools in R5s and R6s, so we just bump it up one to give us an opportunity for future expansion of additions for the school should the district grow or have additional needs in the future.
And you've met with city staff before you came today in front of the council, correct?
Yes, sir. We had a pre-application meeting with the city.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Here's what I know. If you can give your card to that gentleman in the
Yep.
back, usually that communication solves a lot of the issues.
Yes.
It didn't sound like he was so much opposed to the project, but maybe needed some more information to help him out.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a motion to approve 23 and 24, but on your way out, if you could give me your card, that
You bet.
would
I would be happy to.
Thank you.
Yes.
Motion and a second. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo.
Yes.
Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Thank you.
Items 25 through 27 can be considered together for property located southeast of 38th Avenue and Dodge Street. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. Item 25, an ordinance to rezone this property from R8 District to TOD to MX. Item 26, an ordinance to approve a PUR overlay district. Item 27, an ordinance to rescind the ACI overlay district.
Public hearing and votes on numbers 25, 26, and 27 are today. Proponents, please.
Hi there, Josh Hannum, 1410 North Saddle Creek, part of the development team. I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Motion and a second. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 28, a resolution to approve a special use permit to allow a broadcast tower in the CC district with a waiver to section 55-366 height located at 799 North Skyline Drive. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing and vote on number 28 is today. Proponents, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Sean Hempstead with GSS representing High Tech Towers at 4432 McKinley Avenue.
Thank you. Any other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 28 is approved 7-0. Item 29, to consider a Class I liquor license for Porky Butts Barbecue located at 15475 Ruggles Street, Suite 114.
Public hearing and vote on number 29 is today. Proponents, please.
Mr. President, members, Mike Kelly, 2804 South 87th Avenue. This is a party room in the same complex, but we need a new license to put it there. And with that, we're here for any other questions you might have.
Thank you. Any other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 29 is approved, 7-0. Item 30, to consider a Class D liquor license for Quick Shop 350799, located at 2202 North 90th Street, A's Communication.
Public hearing and vote on number 30 is today. We have the applicant by Zoom, Mr. Burke. I'll get you off mute here in a minute. All right, try that.
Yeah, it's Robert Burke, District Manager for Quick Shop, Omaha, Nebraska.
And your address?
North 90th,
Is that close enough for the clerk?
3806 South 14th, Omaha, Nebraska.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. Any other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Motion and a second, roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe.
As for your address, not to.
Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 30 is approved, 7-0.
So the item was approved, so your testimony was very effective. Thank you.
Consent agenda. Any member of the City Council may cause any item placed on the consent agenda be removed. Items removed from the consent agenda shall be taken up by the City Council immediately following the consent agenda in the order in which they were removed, unless otherwise provided by the City Council Rules of Order.
We'll remove number 31 from this consent agenda. There's been a request to lay that item over. So first, we'll address items 32 through 38, who had their public hearing on June 28th. Is there a motion? Motion and a second. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed, 7-0.
Item number 31. I don't know if Mr. Stubbe would like to request to address this item, or if Mr. Thompson's still here. I think the issue is just a 2-week layover request to fulfill a CC1 obligation. Is that correct?
Bob Stubbe, Public Works. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Motion and a second.
Okay. August 2nd meeting.
Yep.
Okay.
Motion and a second. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed, 7-0.
Okay. We're going to take number 57 off the consent agenda. I think we may have some family members here or someone representing that street renaming item here to speak to that specifically. So first, we'll take the public hearings on items number 39 through 56 and 58 through 78 today. If you wish to address the City Council regarding these items, please come to the microphone, indicate the agenda item number you wish to address, identify yourself by name, address, who you represent, and if you are a proponent or an opponent.
Good afternoon. I'm here to address agenda item 65. I'm Alicia Christensen with Together. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy there. The address is 812 South 24th Street. And I just wanted to express my appreciation on behalf of Together and say that we appreciate the approval of this Community Development Block Grant Program. Safe housing is a basic human right, and this allows us to provide essential case management services and assistance to Omaha families and individuals who need to have a safe place to call home. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else here to address these items?
Hi, my name is Joseph Gitter. I'm here to address item number 70. I'm in opposition to that. My company is Bohemian Photo Works, which is named in part for my ancestors who came to Omaha in the 1870s. We provide photography, videography, and creative services to clients throughout the Omaha area. We're recognized by the city of Omaha as an emerging small business, and we're also an SBA hub zone, certified hub zone. In the fall of 2018, I left my job as a senior executive at a federal agency and moved from Washington, D.C. to Omaha to start a small business. I could have lived anywhere, but I believe that Omaha would be a great place to start a business. A guiding principle of Bohemian PhotoWorks is to give back to the community. And like a lot of small businesses, we were hit hard by the pandemic, yet we chose to donate our portrait session fees to a local food bank. We also tried to help the morale of UNMC nurses on the front line of fighting COVID by offering complimentary portraits. More recently, I've been applying my teaching experience as an instructor at the Washington, D.C. School of Photography and as an adjunct professor at photography at Bellevue University to help mentor and train promising photographers and videographers who are from underrepresented communities within the Omaha area. So when the opportunity came up for the Omaha Public Library promotional videography project, I thought that was a great fit. Last year, my company produced over 70 videos for the state of Nebraska. I do have a sort of a reference letter attached. I thought it was a great opportunity. We submitted a proposal, and when I saw the notice of intent that OPL was awarding the contract to another entity, I requested feedback from OPL. I received no feedback, despite 2 emails to OPL. So after 2 weeks, I submitted a request for public records so I could see the winning bid. And much to my surprise, the winning bid was $28,000 more than my bid. I had the lowest bid. So in situations like this, I tried to put myself in the shoes of other stakeholders. So first, as a tax-paying citizen of Omaha, it bothers me that the city is spending $28,600 extra on promotional videos that could be put to better use, such as buying computer equipment for the Omaha Central Public Library, and we heard a lot of things about great plans for that. As an owner of a Tier 1 emerging small business, I consider the experience that I had with OPL as sort of a slap in the face. As you're all aware, the language in the city ordinance clearly states, and I'm quoting here, "The city shall make every good faith effort feasible to utilize small and emerging small businesses in all city contracts." However, from what I can determine, those objectives are only administered when it's convenient to the department. The feedback that I received from OPL when I eventually did get feedback was due to the condensed timeline of the project, they awarded the proposal based on the resources available from the vendor that they selected, and they wanted to ensure that there would be several team members committed to working on all aspects of the project, regardless of any unforeseen circumstances. I believe my company has a proven track record of completing complex and comprehensive videography projects, and I believe that our proposal was dismissed in part because we didn't list a multitude of employees working on the project. As a small emerging business, I have to make sure that we run lean and agile and rely on contractors as necessary. That doesn't mean that we're any less reliable. In fact, because of my connections with professional photographers of Nebraska, we have access to a vast network of some of the top photographers and videographers in the state of Nebraska. So if OPL had a concern about this, they could have requested a meeting. That was an option in the timeline. They did not request a meeting. They did not even check my references. From the perspective of OPL, I would want to make sure that they were being open and transparent as possible in selecting a vendor for this project, especially considering some of the recent criticism about not being open and transparent. I think this was a lost opportunity for OPL to be transparent. Section 10141 of the city ordinance states, and I know you're all familiar with this, all contracts in excess of $20,000, whether the consideration therefore is to be paid by or to the city, shall be approved by resolution of the council. I'm going to ask, if you take a look at your package and you look at the timeline in front of you, there was no timeline for this for OPL coming to the city council requesting approval of this. And it was only after I contacted 2 city council members that I got notified by the city clerk that they were adding it to the city council agenda. I don't know if this is a gross oversight on the part of OPL or if it was a deliberate attempt to evade city requirements for the sake of expediency. In any event, I believe it further erodes trust in OPL. And I want to make it clear that I really do support the Omaha Public Library as an institution. As a boy growing up in North Omaha in the Miller Park neighborhood, we didn't have encyclopedias. So when I wanted to do a school report, I had to walk a 2.5-mile round trip to the North Omaha Public Library branch at near 29th and Ames. And I made that trip probably a couple of times a week. I believe that access to a library when I was younger has helped me become a lifelong learner. And I do support the plans for a new central library and for moving the downtown branch. But I believe that the enigmatic approach that OPL took regarding this contract undermines their credibility and further erodes public trust. Therefore, I am requesting the City Council defer a decision on this resolution until an independent review of the selection process has been completed. In the longer term, I'm asking the City Council to evaluate how it can remove some of the obstacles currently facing emerging small businesses, starting with the current contracting process. The language in the city ordinance concerning emerging small businesses isn't really worth the paper that it's written on unless it translates to tangible outcomes. Small, innovative businesses and creatives like my company are struggling to stay afloat because of the increased costs associated with doing business, especially increased taxes. In the Mastercraft building where my studio is located, our real estate taxes have increased 200% over the last 4 years, and that gets translated to increased overhead costs for a small business owner. I would hope Omaha, like other cities, would not only take the necessary steps to remove obstacles to growth, but to promote the growth of startups. I believe that these steps are critical if Omaha is to reach its full potential as a city that is favorable to startups. I appreciate your time and attention. Thank you.
Thank you. I know we have a light on, and also the library director is still with us, so I'm sure we'll have some further conversation about this item. But before I close the public hearings, are there anyone else here to address numbers 39 through 56 or 58 through 78?
A little extra hard of hearing today. If I misunderstand you, I apologize. But on number 65, I am opposed to this. I've never heard of Family Housing Advisory Services. I've heard of a lot of agencies around to help people in need. I wonder if this is a duplication of some services already available and exactly for who and why. Or is it creating a new nonprofit for the city of Omaha and the county? The county had such programs on their agenda earlier today and in the past. Are we duplicating something that the county already does? Is there an agency for an old person like me to get mortgage assistance, to get property tax assistance? If you're assisting on everything else, it seems like you would on property tax. It's not your problem, I guess, it's the county, but you can maybe help me out with the county. Particularly if I am affected by a cold during COVID. This doesn't say ARPA dollars, but I wonder if there are ARPA dollars involved in this because everybody's running for the money while it's available. Problem is, when the money runs out, somebody's gonna have to cough up to keep these agencies that are being created and these services to keep them running. And if you can't, people will be getting angry about that. So you need to think about how much you're giving away, why, and how many people are giving it away. Don't duplicate. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further testifiers, I'm going to close the public hearing. Yes? Okay, come on down if you want to testify on these items.
Good afternoon. Pat Evans, City Planning Department, here to address item number 65 and the questions that perhaps people have. I am a proponent. These funds are CDBG COVID dollars that were allocated to the city in 2020 for the express purpose of rental assistance and mortgage assistance. Excuse me. That's the only services that these funds could provide. They were originally allocated to Match, who was unable to fulfill their contract. We deobligated it from Match and then awarded FAS, that's what this agreement is, Family Advisory Housing Services, to do what the funds were intended to do. It is not a duplication of benefit. It does provide rental assistance that has been provided through ARP and ERAP and other kinds of funding that came to the city to assess people under duress and unable to pay their rent through the COVID period. Any funds that are allocated to individuals for rental assistance, whether that be current rent or arrears or utilities or arrears and utilities, are not duplication of what they've already received, but perhaps a continuation of what they need. It is up to a maximum of 3 months of assistance, and they do have to income qualify under CDBG. There is quite a bit of documentation that also has to be done, unlike some of the previous funding sources that were available. So Family Housing Advisory Services will be using these funds through next year. These funds have a sunset date, basically August 2023. We have to expend 80% of our COVID dollars. Everything that is spent has to be directly related to COVID and the results of COVID influences. So there are quite a bit of restrictions on this funding that were perhaps not as restrictive on the other funding. So there is procedures through HUD to assure that there is not duplication of benefit, that people are not receiving the same kind of funds at the same time. There is a system within HUD where you can check where people have received other fundings from. These perhaps are returning people or people that have yet to receive assistance for both of those things, either mortgage or rental assistance or utility assistance.
Okay. Thank you.
Here to answer any questions.
Appreciate that. I'm going to close the public hearing on these items. I would call out 2 items that I'll be supporting today in this grouping, which is number 66, which is new equipment to the Gallagher Pool at Gallagher Park. It starts what will be over $1 million worth of public improvements to that park, and great for that neighborhood. And then number 55, which we talked about this morning a little bit, and the importance of completing what will be an enhancement to our Complete Streets master plan item, which is to create an appendix that addresses new street lights and street trees throughout the city, which I think are really important to the look and feel of our city. I just had one question on that for Mr. Stubbe, who's talking at the moment, which is if that contract is approved today, what's the time frame for getting those results back and then back to the council? This is number 55, the street trees and street lighting. Do you need a minute?
I'm looking at the contract, and I don't see anything that pops up to me right away that indicates as far as when they're supposed to provide that information back to us.
Okay. What would your expectation be, your estimate of that be?
Because of the fact that there's a number of tasks that are associated with this for two different components, one being street lights and the other one being street trees, I would anticipate probably 6 to 9 months.
Okay, thank you. I know Councilmember Johnson had her light on to address number 70, right? You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Item number 70, do we have anyone, a member of staff, city, that can speak to this item?
Ms. Marlene's on Zoom, if you want to ask the library director.
Yes, Ms. Marlene. Mr. Gideer came to the podium to talk about his bid for the work. Can you elaborate on that? I know that I had put some information, I sent an email inquiring about some of his concerns regarding the fact that the interpretation of the bid was that he would complete the work as a solo agent and that perhaps he did not have any additional staff. After looking into that, there was information coming back from your desk indicating that you had a new staff member that perhaps was somewhat not familiar with the process of bidding, and there was somewhat of an oversight. Maybe perhaps she should have reached out to Mr. Gideer for more information regarding the number of staff that he had. So can you speak to that, please?
Yes, certainly. My marketing manager, Emily Getchman, worked with the purchasing department to craft the RFP. Once all the bids were in, she put together a selection committee and she selected Dundee Digital as the best lowest bid. One of the primary factors was the number of team members involved in working on the project. We have a really quick deadline to meet, and she wanted to make sure that there were enough people working on the project that there would be no delays. And Mr. Gidier's application said that he was the only person who would be working on this project, and he would have a voiceover actor as well. He did not mention contracting out any of this work. So based on those applications, Dundee Digital had the best lowest bid, and they're able to meet our deadline. And just as a point of clarification, the funds for this project are coming from our foundation. So they're not taxpayer funds. And if this is held over, we will not be able to complete the project on the deadline that we had outlined.
Ms. Marlene, I understand that. However, in underserved communities such as the area in which this is being done or completed at, we're concerned about giving everyone an opportunity to get a leg up. And so we have asked the City of Omaha to provide us with a digital or electronic bidding process that will allow us to mitigate some of these misunderstandings that we have oftentimes. So, and then we have a new employee, and your response back was that perhaps they were green in their decision making.
No, Emily is not a new employee. She's been with our organization for quite some time. This was the first RFP she had worked on directly, but again, it was under the guidance of the purchasing department, and this is what they do all the time. Emily looked at the bids and selected the best lowest bid. Mr. Gideer spelled out very clearly in his application that he was the only person who would be working on this. And while we always do our best to reach out and work with SEBs, from the information I had, that was also not on his original application. So we went with the company that could best meet the needs of the project, and that was Dundee Digital.
So, when you're evaluating the individuals for a project, do you just look at face value of their application? You don't explore further? You don't make phone calls? Or more importantly, after Mr. Gideon has raised this confusion or this concern that there was a misunderstanding that he does have more than one person employed, is there a plan to address that going forward in other decisions that we make in the future?
There is no plan at this point in time. I can reach out to the purchasing department to see if there are guidelines we could put together to address these issues when they come up again. But Emily worked with the information she was given, and Mr. Gideon did not provide the information that was needed for him to win the project.
I would recommend that we explore expanding that because, again, the importance of getting a wider pool of opportunities is very important and essential to giving individuals a leg up in our communities that are underserved. I think that we should do a better job, when we use business models, that we should do a better job at making sure that we're not assuming and interpreting things simply because of an application. I would think that we would want to at least make a phone call or do a positive handoff exchange with the person that put in the application.
Well, that is something we will definitely do in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Melton, you're recognized.
Thank you. And I just wanted to confirm, because I think that the process is if you want to appeal the bid rejection, can you do that? Or is this a case, Bernard, I don't know, Bernard or Mr. Kuzi, Bernard, can you please explain the difference? Because I think this is something that's a specialized, it's advertising. So I know it's not necessarily just the lowest bid. It's not just, putting concrete down to fix sidewalks. Although I have to say this council has picked not the lowest bid before and denied someone who's done a bad job in the past. I don't think we have that case here. What we have is specialized, is this like advertising or promotion?
Well,
so would this be different than, let's say, a concrete contract?
Bernard Innenbush, Deputy City Attorney. So there's an underlying misunderstanding, I think, that occurs, and I think Ms. Marlene, her testimony continued to perpetuate that misunderstanding.
Yes. We
do put out requests for bids, which this is what we want to have done, a concrete project, whatever else. And it doesn't have, the presumption when you put out for a bid is that you put out specifications so that everybody who puts in for the bid can perform that work to those specifications, and that's all that's required. And in those cases, we do have an SCB program that's implicated. That's something that's part of the process, and you do choose the lowest and best bid. This was not a request for bid. This was a request for professional services, an RFP. And what that does is you put out say, hey, this is what we'd like to do. And it allows you to evaluate not only price, that's obviously one thing that's important, but also the resources the party has, their background, their experience, the credentials they have, the references they have, all those things can be considered. And you choose somebody because they have, at least in your view, the professional services that better fit what you're attempting to accomplish for your particular department. Now, not everything can go out as an RFP. That's sometimes a debate, and that's one of the areas that you work with purchasing on, is determining what types of projects have to be a bidding process, what have to be a request for professional services. And the city has a lawyer, Mr. Wiesen, who works with them on that, answers questions, and provides guidance in that particular case. But there appears to be a fundamental, price is obviously important, but when it comes to awarding an RFP, it is not the sole consideration, where frequently when you're talking about bidding projects where hey, you just have to meet this certain level, and presumption is all these different companies can do it. Price is the ultimate decider. When you're talking about professional services, and when Ms. Marlene discussed it, she certainly discussed a number of elements: ability to do it, timeliness, number of people, experience that would play into consideration. And I don't dispute Ms. Johnson's comments about the need to make sure that we have a wide variety of people responding to RFP requests, whatever else. But to talk about the SCB program in this context, it doesn't apply to RFPs the way it's written currently. So that's a little bit of a distraction. I'm more familiar with this than I normally would be because there was a couple public records responses. I did speak with Mr. Gitter on the phone in that regard as well, because I provided him some documents and they called and asked some follow-up questions. And I did explain that to him in my phone conversation as well.
Well, and that goes back to, I know that there was an allegation made that made it look like the library department was going to try and hide this. And I'm looking at just what's available to us, which says the schedule of events. This went out to all of the people that were putting a proposal in, and it actually had a timeline. It states that the number 7, that the final recommended selection would be done approximately June 15th, 2022. And then the contract award date would be approximately June 22nd, 2022. And it looks like Ms. McFarlane did sign it in a timely manner, even though it just said approximately, on 6/13/2022. And that was the letter to the Omaha City Council indicating it was being sent to the City Council. We put on our agenda. Now, we have had the last 2 weeks off, so I understand that. Then, by the way, it was her signature first. Mayor Stothert, Franklin Thompson, and also Steve Curtis signed it, and it's all original. So those other three people signed it on different days. So by the time the 4th person signed it, and then it came to council, we had the 2 weeks off. So I just want to say that when you throw allegations out there that we were going to basically violate city ordinances, when I look at the dates and I look at the signatures, and it was the signatures on the letter giving it to the council for our vote, I just wanted to see if you have any response to that, because there was absolutely no indication that I see that this was ever going to not come before us for a vote, as the allegation was laid.
Well, and I'm not aware of any indication that it wasn't going to come for your vote. And again, I don't know the relative merits of the different companies. I'm not opining one way or the other as to whether this is the best or the not best. This is really a process discussion. And the other reason the bid rejection wasn't available because it wasn't a bid. So there isn't an ability to appeal to this body. And I think there's some understanding. I'm guessing the clerk's office had some discussion about that. At least from the time that I got involved in regards to the public records request would have been the 20th to 25th of June. There was no question that it was going to council, and frankly, that was, Mr. Gitter was made aware of that during my phone conversation. I believe I even, in the documents I provided in response to his request, provided a copy of the document that was going to council in late June, even though obviously it didn't show up on the agenda until the agenda was published for this meeting last Thursday. But I did provide him a copy of it because by that point it had been signed by all the parties. And I didn't, even though it technically wasn't a public record until it's published, I felt it was appropriate that he receive a copy of it.
Right, and that's also attached. It was attached to our agenda, as they all are, every single one. It's a letter from the mayor to the city council, and it has the department head and everybody else. And that's for every bid, every proposal, everything we vote on every week. Those are attached. So that's how I was able to, just in 5 minutes, look back at the timeline, look back to see when people signed it, and it was signed immediately, meaning they were immediately sending it to the city council as soon as the decision was made. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. And I understand. I have one more question. Laura, Marlene, are you still there?
Yes.
And there was something about, small businesses, which I understand, and I agree. I like giving small businesses the business, but I don't know the individuals that apply, but it seems to me that most of these were all small businesses in our community. Is Dundee Digital, to your knowledge, a small business in Omaha?
Yes.
Okay, thank
I
you.
don't know that they're an SEB formally with the city, but they are a small local business.
This was for videography, correct? A professional service for videography?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing.
Ms. Johnson, you're recognized.
Yes, Mr. Gideon, are you still somewhere? Okay.
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to clarify. If you go
Just
to...
your name and address again for
I'm sorry, yeah, this is Joseph Gitter, and my business address is 1111 North 13th Street. If you go into the city's website and you look at bids and requests for proposals, and I challenge you to do this, look at every request for proposal. It has a timeline in there. And on that timeline, it will include a step that requires going to city council. That was not on this timeline, and that's why I was not sure this was going to city council. So I didn't have any communication back from the Omaha Public Library. Quite frankly, I'm new to this process, so it was a learning experience for me. So I did not see that and it's not in the timeline, but if you go to any other RFP, if you go to the city's website, it will be in that timeline. So for some reason, it was left off the timeline. And that was my point. It was left off the timeline. I'm not accusing anybody. I don't know what happened. It may have been just an oversight on the part of OPL, but it was not on the original timeline, and it should have been, because it is on every other RFP original timeline. The other thing I wanted to mention is, yeah, I did say in the application, or the proposal rather, that I was the only other person in addition to the professional sound actor. I did not think it was going to take more than one person to do, quite frankly. Last year for the state of Nebraska, as I said, I created 70 videos over a 4-month period. If I were to run into problems, and I did end up contracting 4 photographers to help me out, but I truly am working with photographers and videographers in the underserved community, and if I don't get projects to work on, I can't have them help me. Okay, and that was the basis for that statement. So my message regarding the emerging small business is that if it only applies to subcontractors working on construction contracts, I don't think that's good enough. I think I would really appreciate if the city council could take another look at how emerging small businesses are being used in all contracts within the city, which is currently what the language in states in the city charter, not the charter, but the, I'm sorry, in the well, I have it quoted here right now. That language is. It's in my testimony, but it is currently reflected as in the language that discusses small businesses, but I don't really believe that if it's only being applied to subcontractors working on construction projects, that's really sufficient enough. If you really want to support emerging small businesses, I think it's important to include, or at least consider, having departments consider emerging small businesses. And at the end, they may not be the best fit, I understand that, but at least have them take a hard look, because I felt that certainly OPL had an opportunity to reach out to me, and they didn't do that. And I think in a perfect world, that would have happened. So that's it.
Okay, Mr. Gideon, I just wanted to make sure that after we've had all this conversation about your concern about this process, are you satisfied with the outcome and the information that was given back to you by OPL? I know that this is your first time, this is a learning process, and I just wanted to give you the opportunity to gain that understanding, and at the same time share with the OPL that perhaps there was a better way to do business as it relates to your concern. I just wanted to give you that opportunity to discuss that. And now, at this time, I want to make sure that you understand why their decision was as is.
I appreciate that. I have experience reviewing contracts at the federal level. I've managed projects with billion-dollar implications in my prior career. And, you know, I really didn't believe that this video would require more than 2 people, which is what I had in my contract, in my proposal, rather. But I think that when I sent the email to OPL and I requested feedback, and they waited 2 weeks to give me feedback, and the feedback was basically, you didn't have enough people. We didn't think you had enough people to work on the project. I would have liked an opportunity earlier in the process. There is something in the timeline that talks about interviews with the bid or the proposal submitters if necessary. And I think in this case, it would have been better if they had reached out to me and asked me those questions. I'm certainly going to take this as a learning experience, but I do think there's more that can be done for emerging small businesses, not just in the construction area, but throughout all city contracts, which is what the language currently states.
So thank you for bringing this to our attention. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Mr. Palermo, you're recognized.
Disregard.
Okay, disregard. No further lights on these items. And this is 39 through 56, 58 through 78?
Yes,
Motion and a second. Roll call.
Johnson.
Yes.
Melton. Palermo.
Yes.
Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 57, a resolution to approve a commemorative street name of Richard Brown Avenue on Patrick Avenue from 34th Street to 35th Street.
Public hearing on number 57 is today. Proponents, please. Wasn't sure if we had any family members or representatives of Richard Brown here today. Don't see any. All right. Any other proponents? Seeing none. Any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Ms. Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just going to go ahead and read what we have here as it relates to the resolution on this street renaming. Richard Papa Bear Brown dedicated over 35 years of his life to the North Omaha community, impacting numerous lives along the way. He was employed by the Wesley House Community Center for 25 years, as well as Franklin Elementary School for 10 years. Brown taught and coached youth sports at Wesley House and also served as the youth director of USA Wrestling Nebraska. Richard helped lead Omaha South to 3 straight state championships in wrestling, as well as the 1957 championship in football. After high school, he wrestled for Iowa State and finished 3rd in the Big 8 tournament in 1960. This commemorative designation would honor Mr. Brown on Patrick Avenue from 34th Street to 35th Street. I move that we go ahead and accept this resolution with the recommendation to edit the resolution to, since this is a legal document, that my name is City Councilwoman Johnson, and that it reflects that on here rather than the plain mentioning of city council member.
And for clarification, where does that appear? Is that in the resolution or the cover letter or?
The resolution.
All right, I don't have that in front of me. I guess, Madam Clerk or Mr. Kuzi, is that an appropriate motion on something like this?
Are you meaning on the now therefore be it resolved?
Yes.
Is it that section?
Resolved by the City Council of City of Omaha.
Page 2.
No, right here. Oh, it's, inserting Johnson after City Council Member Johnson representing the district?
It says here, planning director of the city council member representing district.
Yeah.
That's where, we do know who that city council member is. Since this is a legal document, then that should reflect city council member Johnson.
That would be an
Because
amendment.
10 years from now, we will not know who that council member is or was.
Okay. I think that's standard language, right? But I'm not opposed to what you're describing. That'd be a simple amendment. And I think you just made the motion to approve with that amendment?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The planning director and city council member Johnson. So if you want to make that your amendment, I just wanted to be clear for the record how it should actually read.
Okay. Is that
That's fine.
that's your motion?
That's my motion.
I'll take an amendment and then to be approved as amended.
Strike the and add Johnson after council member.
Should we include Dave Fanslow then too?
Is your light on?
No, no. Well, actually, it looks like it is.
Okay. I don't see. No? Okay. That's the suggested amendment. I will second. It would amend this particular resolution. No further lights. Roll call.
Johnson?
Yes.
Melton?
Yes.
Palermo?
Yes.
Rowe? Bagley?
Aye.
Harding? Mr. President?
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Now, as amended, correct?
Yes.
As amended, Ms. Johnson?
I do have to do what now?
Motion to approve as amended.
I move to approve the resolution as amended.
Second. Roll call.
Johnson?
Yes.
Melton? Palermo? Rowe? Bagley? Harding? Mr. President?
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 79, an ordinance to acquire private property to construct the 48th and Center Street Lift Station Access Drive.
Public hearing on number 79 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Item 80, an ordinance vacating the north-south alley lying east of South 31st Street, south of 8th Street. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing on number 80 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Item 81, an ordinance to approve the View on 39th Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Agreement.
Public hearing on number 81 is today. Proponents, please. Ms. Hadley.
Good afternoon, Bridget Hadley, City Planning, here to answer questions that you may have.
Thank you. Any other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents?
Donnie Johnson, 4928 North 52nd Street, the Johnson and Question Foundation, and North Omaha Concerned Citizen Foundation. Again, Councilman, City Council Omaha, Greater City Council Omaha, we would like for you folks to say, we can buy all the gold we possibly can, but we need land. So would you folks consider that in your next tax instrument for some folks in North Omaha? Land. Does that make sense? Mr. President, you're always telling me to stay on
Yes, we need you to
script.
do that. This is number 81, which is 3902 Dodge Street.
Yeah, but again, Dodge Street and that whole development down there, I have no problem with that. I told them before, look folks, you took the Ebola money and started tearing it down, you didn't do any of what you were supposed to do, and you built parking lots. Now you're getting more money for some things. I'll tell you the best part, if you can figure this out, Mr. Frederickson, since you're a great city councilman, all that COVID we had and all that money we spent on that Dodge area, how many citizens went down there for medical treatment? They put 20 away.
So this is not the med center. This is.
Well, it's a part of that whole process, all that Settle Creek and all of it. This is all of it. I go down there nosing around all the time. And I found them spending Ebola money last time. Now they're spending money they aren't supposed to this time. It ain't none of my business. I'm just looking for land for us in North Omaha.
Okay.
That make sense?
Thank you. Any other opponents today?
Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. I'm opposed to TIF in general, and in this area of 39th and Dodge, 3902, I've been by there a couple of times. I don't see why that needs to be developed, other than to draw hope to build it so they will come, I guess is the word, to support the new bus monster, that thing they call Orbit, that nobody rides. But also, it's just right up the street from the Blackstone area. Not too far from there going north to the Salvation Army and Cummings Street. So we have another social services opportunity zone in this area, I guess. But it sounds to me like it's part of the master plan. Provide the bus thing all the way to Fremont and Des Moines and build it and they will come. But I think you're going to find out with technology going the way it is that people aren't going to come. They're going to stay home and work. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other opponents today? See none, public hearings closed. Ms. Hadley, I might just a comment for you. I didn't know if the applicant was going to be here today, but I'm fully supportive of this project and seeing the old travel lane get redeveloped. But I will note that in the meantime, and sometimes these things do take time when we're going through this process of redevelopment agreements, but the site has not been well kept. If you could pass along to the developer that we expect them to keep that mode and in shape in the meantime, that'd be appreciated.
I will. The attorney who represents that developer is also here, so we do hear the message.
All right, message received. Thank you, Mr. Jobin. Next item.
Item 82, an ordinance to approve a major amendment to mixed-use district development agreement for Candlewood Hills located at 708 North 124th Plaza. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing on number 82 is today. Proponents, please.
Hello, Katie Underwood Olson, representing the applicant, 2111 South 67th Street. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any other proponents today? See none. Any opponents? Public hearing's closed.
Item 83, an ordinance levying a special tax assessment for Weeds Group 2022-06.
Public hearing on number 83 is today. Proponents, please. See none. Any opponents? Public hearing's closed.
Item 84, an ordinance levying a special tax assessment for Litter Group 2022-07.
Public hearing on number 84 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none. Any opponents? Public hearing's closed.
Item 85, an ordinance to approve a master customer agreement with Motorola Solutions, Inc. in a total amount of $1,214,182.
Public hearing on number 85 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none. Any opponents? Public hearing's closed.
Item 86, an ordinance to accept the bid of Hyman Fire Equipment to provide 114 sets of personal protective equipment bunker gear for the Omaha Fire Department.
Public hearing on number 86 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none. Any opponents? Public hearing's closed.
Item 87, an ordinance to...
Mr. Palermo, where's your light on? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to slow you down a little bit, Madam Clerk. Thank you, Mr. President. This is a softball for me, talking about number 86. With the opening of the new Fire Station 31, that myself, Councilmember Harding, Councilmember Melton, obviously the mayor and the chief split the hose apart at. And when we talk about this PPE and we talk about this extra set of bunker gear or the bunker gear for the firefighters, it takes me back to the station, which I really don't have words to describe. I think everybody that is stationed there now will probably never, ever retire until we make them. And part of that tour and part of the facility was what we seen with the extractors, which would wash this bunker gear for the firefighters. It's an entire full room with a shower. You can hose off and get all the contaminants off you. And then obviously the machines that will be in this station to keep our firefighters safe. So I wanted to mention 31, but also definitely in support of this PPE for the firefighters. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for mentioning that. This is an important item. I know we have firefighters with us today. This, I think, completes the funding of the second set of turnout gear we've been working towards for quite some time and is very important. So thanks for pointing that out. Mr. Hardy.
Thank you. I too was just going to mention the having the importance of the second set of the turnout gear for fire. And I know this is a project we started working on a couple of years ago, and I'm glad we're finally to this point. And I want to thank Vinny's son for being a model in the picture I posted for the splitting of the hoses at 31.
He liked his firefighter hat, that's for sure.
All right, thank you. Next item.
Item 87, an ordinance to approve an agreement with DeMarsh and Associates, Inc. to provide advisory services for the City of Omaha's Investment Management Committee.
Public hearing on number 87 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Item 88, an ordinance to approve an agreement between Heartland Workforce Solutions and Dynamic Workforce Solutions in the amount of $1,900,000 to benefit the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act Title I Youth.
Public hearing on number 88 is today. Proponents, please.
Hello, my name is Stan Odenthal. I'm with Heartland Workforce Solutions, 5752 Ames Avenue, and I'm a proponent for this. If you have any questions, I'd be here to answer those, as well as item number 89.
Great. Thanks for staying with us. Any other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Item 89, an ordinance to approve an agreement between Heartland Workforce Solutions and National Able Network in the amount of $1,934,070 for adult and dislocated worker services at the Greater Omaha Workforce Development Area One-Stop Center.
Public hearing on number 89 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Oh, public hearing is closed. Number 90 is getting anxious there. They've been here all day.
Item 90, an ordinance to approve a coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds agreement with Front Porch Investments to administer City of Omaha Rescue Act program funds in the amount of $20 million.
Public hearing on number 90 is today. First, we'll take the applicants, and this is an example of one of those items that is complex in nature and new. So we have asked the applicant, Front Porch, and Ms. Dillon to give a brief presentation on this program of work, and then we'll take proponents and opponents. And we have some folks by Zoom on this one too, as proponents. So,
Is there a way to get back to the desktop here?
Yes, we'll clear that screen. Oh, all right. Okay. For your knowledge, we lost your Zoom members there, but I think you're
Okay.
well aware of the Impact Development Fund and can speak to any questions that might come about that part of this.
Oh, that's the wrong one. Okay. There we go. There we go. Thank you. Meredith Dillon, 1120 South 101st Street. I'm the Executive Director of Front Porch Investments. Thanks so much for giving us a couple minutes just to share about our organization briefly and a very brief presentation, and happy to answer any questions that you have. Front Porch Investments was created with this vision that our community, we're a community committed to ensuring all have a home where they can thrive with bold decisions and effective innovation that reflects housing as a human right. So part of our mission as an organization is to make sure we're housing our community. And Front Porch was created as a response from a study that you all are familiar with. We've had lots of discussions around it on the affordability in the Omaha and Council Bluffs area. And 5 main goals came out of that study with strategies that were attached to these goals. And many of them are reflected in the proposal today. So to accelerate the production of quality dedicated affordable housing, preserve and improve the quality of existing affordable housing, prevent and address housing instability and homelessness, and foster innovations that reduce the cost of providing quality affordable housing, as well as providing relief and assistance to residents in neighborhoods experiencing gentrification. And those strategies that were that came from these goals included setting up large-scale funds for the preservation and development of affordable housing. Our programs cover a wide variety of housing need across our community, and the Development and Preservation Fund, which this proposal is attached with, is shown here in the presentation to really help you understand the breadth of the types of housing opportunity that this fund can actually support. Front Porch Investments did an innovation round of funding this spring, and I wanted to share a couple of points from that process that we learned, which was number one, that the need is high in our community. So in a 2-week cycle, we received $49.6 million worth of requests through applications and awarded over $7 million in both loans and grants during that cycle. Some of the outcomes and impact from that cycle, we're seeing catalyzing over 700 units of mixed income and affordable housing, launching new pilot programs through nonprofits, supporting emerging developers. So we specifically supported 3 Black developers in North Omaha on their inaugural projects, which we were excited to be able to do, as well as supporting partnership with Canopy South and the city in an application for HUD funding through Choice Neighborhoods. And then supporting or leveraging public-private partnership, obviously, is an important part of our work, and you'll see that, again, through that Choice Neighborhoods application. So the Development and Preservation Fund broad goals are, just as the name states, is to really provide gap financing and support for the development of new affordable housing, as well as providing support for the preservation of either naturally occurring affordable housing or housing that's in disrepair that, if reinvested in with these types of dollars, could also ensure that those units become dedicated and affordable. The strategy between the City of Omaha and Front Porch Investments includes $20 million ARPA funding coming to Front Porch Investments, and Front Porch Investments providing a $20 million philanthropic match to those funds. There are several ways that the funds will be allocated, and we've created a plan that allows us to maximize the use of ARPA by first funding low-interest loans, and then when those funds return, push the funding out a second time in the form of grants. So it's a way to really be able to maximize the federal funding and produce as many units of housing as well as much supportive programming as possible through the ARPA funding. Some of the key elements, again, development of rental and for sale affordable housing units, preservation of existing affordable housing units, things like acquisition, site remediation, pre-development activities can be supported, as well as homebuyer supports and down payment assistance for individuals and families who are looking at homeownership or trying to maintain their home ownership. I also want to point out that this proposal was supported by 12 other nonprofit organizations. Many of them were here today, and unfortunately, the rearrangement in the schedule, we lost several of our partners, but I'm sure we can have them send emails of follow-up since they weren't all able to attend for the period of time, and we're grateful for those who are here to support us today. Our funding goals overall, again, to make new affordable housing units, preserve, as well as increase opportunities for home ownership for low to moderate income families. Because this process is an application-driven process, we can't tell you the exact amount that will be given to each activity, but I've listed out our estimates based on our prior funding rounds, as well as the estimates of costs per each activity that we anticipate funding with both the ARPA dollars as well as the private funding. So pre-development activities, again, development, preservation, and gap financing, property owner preservation and rehabilitation, as well as homebuyer support, housing supportive programs, so connecting folks to affordable housing, capacity building and operation for our both nonprofits that serve, again, in connecting folks to programs, but as well as those that do affordable housing projects. And then the compliance and performance reserves, which is the funding that is actually set aside for the loans as a loan loss reserve. And if those are not drawn down upon, also go into the grant making portion of this agreement. So I wanted to just give you a really quick overview of the first round of funding, some of the parameters, and what this will look like in order to distribute the funding. So up to $15 million in ARPA funding would first be distributed in low-interest loans. Again, these are a 1% fixed interest rate, and the eligible loan types are pre-development, acquisition, construction, and bridge loans. The projects must fall within the boundaries of the city of Omaha. Projects outside of qualified census tracts must provide proof of additional amenities and/or services such as access to transit or employment opportunities. ARPA funding will support the creation of the creation or rehabilitation of units and/or projects for individuals and households at under 120% of the area median income. And that mixed income projects can be funded at the percentage of affordability under 120% of the area median income. A few other details here in terms of just the period of affordability and minimums on those. If you all have questions, I'm happy to get into the details. I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I do want to show you a couple of just quick slides on the funding process, which again includes an application process, front porch and city staff review to filter the number of requests if necessary that are sent on, and this is the loan portion, to underwriting. All of our loan applications go any decision will be made on go through a full underwriting process, and we partner with a group called Impact Development Fund, who are partners who have been waiting on Zoom for us, and they can answer any questions if you have any on the underwriting process. And then front porch and city staff, alongside of the review committee, make recommendations to our board for approval. The board makes decisions on those recommendations, and we announce awards. So just a little bit of a timeline. Again, when we're looking at the first round of ARPA funding, our current schedule, pending your approval of this agreement, would be opening our application cycle August 15th and closing it on September 13th. Again, the quick turnaround is to ensure that we can get those dollars out once in the form of loans, that they can be returned and go out again in the form of grants. All of the first round award funding would be announced in November of 2022. And then in 2023 and 2024, the philanthropic match funding will be used to support both the loans and the grants. We see that the funding comes back in late 2024, early 2025, and again pushed out a second time in the form of grants. All of this alongside of the private funding, where all the activities that were listed will be in funding cycles, and applications will be received throughout that period of time to give these awards for these different activities, all of which the goal is to increase, again, the affordable housing that we have across the community, as well as support and access for individuals and families to be able to get into affordable housing or homeownership.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We'll take other proponents now on number 90.
Hello. My name is Bree Full. My address is 603 North 36th Street, and I am speaking to you today on behalf of Spark. I'm excited to let you know that I am the new advocacy coordinator with the purpose of advancing holistic community development efforts in East Omaha. I'm looking forward to working with each one of you to do just that by creating a better city where people and neighborhoods can grow and thrive. Today, I come to you to enthusiastically express Spark's support of the city's proposed partnership with Front Porch Investments' ongoing efforts to provide funding for addressing Omaha's significant need for more affordable housing options. I'm not here to lecture you on the importance of the work that this project entails, because I already know you understand the impending threat to Omaha's future if we do not fully invest in more affordable housing. The careful consideration that FPI and their stakeholders have taken into developing this proposal will ensure that its implementation process will produce the desired results of building a more robust and sustainable infrastructure for affordable housing development in Omaha. Spark's role in all of this is to play the part of supporting emerging developers with the education and financing needed to invest back into their respective neighborhoods. We know that this approach is important because it provides for a more sustainable and equitable way of development that centers the affected community and prepares them with a framework to keep building off of in the future, with no pun intended on that. The impact of this work will not only be felt in East Omaha, but ultimately will have a positive effect on all of Omaha. More than 1,000 households in Omaha will benefit from it, and the continuous nature of this approach insinuates even more benefits for the future. We urge you to consider the approval of this partnership, and if you have any questions about Spark's role, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Other proponents?
Hi, my name is Alex O'Hanlon, 3902 Davenport Street. Today I'm here on behalf of One Omaha. One Omaha empowers people where they live through education, training, and engagement. We support neighborhood-based organizers working to build thriving neighborhoods. And we know that one of the most foundational aspects of a thriving neighborhood is access to quality, affordable housing. That's why we're here today to support the allocation of ARPA funds to Front Porch Investments for the purpose of building new affordable units, rehabbing existing units, and also assisting with home ownership. This is a smart move on the part of the city and a wise use of ARPA funding. We're very excited for this funding, and we think it's an important step into increasing the amount of affordable housing in Omaha.
Thank you. Other proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents?
Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. Oh boy, oh boy. This was just like the circus sideshow, the carnivals I used to go to as a boy. And they had the barkers and the promotion and the fancy dancy things and the card tricks. Oh yeah, and in the movies, the old movies, there was the medicine man who drove into town in a wagon. Had the doctor or somebody's bitters that would fix everything. This kind of scares me. This was a very good presentation, absolutely beautiful, very touchy with the front porch theme and lonely little chair there in a peaceful backyard. But it scares the hell out of me. You know why? The word gentrification. I picked up on it right away. This is part of the CRT scam, critical race theory, a Marxist theory to pit people against each other. Here we're going to, oh, wait a minute, I forgot the Wimpy Burger. I'll give you $20 million tomorrow if you give me $20 million today. Yeah, there's some private money back there somewhere too that's promising to leverage this other $20 million. But they're also talking about ARPA, and everybody's gonna maybe hopefully get the money from ARPA. Next year, the following year, there will be more ARPA. We don't know that. They might be completely broke any day. And here you're promising to make fair housing, affordable housing for absolutely everybody. I do commend you for including seniors here, support for seniors maybe even. But, ladies and gentlemen, the Constitution of the United States does not allow for all this. It's not our republic. Yes, if you want to make it a socialist democratic republic, then we can have these kind of programs and feed and house absolutely everybody. But you know what? Not everybody wants it. Not everybody will agree with it or go along with it. And then you have a rotting democracy. Thank you. It's happening all over the country.
Thank you. Any other opponents today?
Donnie Johnson, 4928 North 52nd Street, the Johnson in Question Foundation, North Omaha Concerned Citizen Foundation. I think what these young folks are trying to approach is very similar to Habitat and that's other programs. And I recommend they look into it much more deeply, but this is why we've been asking for all these type of programs to invite the United States Department of Agriculture as part of the programs. This would be better for us in North Omaha. Any taxpayers' money, any funding coming out of Washington, D.C. and Douglas County, but that should be part of it. Because homelessness is getting worse and worse. and it's 10 times worse in California, and it's going to get worse and worse. But I believe as we talked to Ronco, and they looked at that 449 acres of land out by Washington County Highway 3536, and they agreed to come out there and move some of the refugees and some of the baby boomers out there, we'd be a lot better of spending taxpayers' money because they'll be working versus having the state or the federal government subsidize their income. This is why we're saying, I like their programs. I've listened to it on TV when they was talking to the mayor, but these type of programs are not working in the long run. So maybe we should, if they can invite the United States Department of Agriculture to work with them to move some of the baby boomers and share the wealth in that direction so that we, as the baby boomers, don't have to rob Paul to pay Peter, because this is not going to work. It hasn't been working. Homeless is getting worse and worse every day. And it's going to continue because there are no jobs. Where is the jobs going to come from? That's what Marty Schuker kept saying. We need to replace the meat packing plants. And they haven't done that. They do everything else other than replace them jobs. Mr. Frederickson, I think you're a wonderful councilman, and I thank you for listening to us.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents today? Seeing none, public hearing's closed. Meredith, I might just ask you a couple questions, and then we'll see if there's any other lights on from council members. So first I want to say thank you for working on this issue. I think it's really important, and it's a complex issue, and I think you have a very well thought out strategy here that you've worked on for quite some time.
Thank you.
And I think although your partners couldn't stick around today because it's gone late, you do have an impressive number of partners. In fact, this is the first time I've seen all housing interests all on the same page, all working together, which I think is critically important to the outcome of this proposal too. And it's not just nonprofit partners, although there's lots of them. This also applies to for-profit developers, right?
Absolutely.
And individuals.
Yes.
Individual homeowners. I think that's an important thing to point out too. So Front Porch is brand new. Can you just briefly tell folks who is Front Porch, who is your board of directors, and then also who is who's the committee making decisions on these applications should this move forward?
Sure. So again, to your point, although Front Porch is somewhat new, this has been a plan that has started back with the assessment of affordable housing for the Omaha and Council Bluffs Metro. So this is a well thought out strategy and plan. It's been underway for over 2 years, and Front Porch was again created as a nonprofit to actually move forward on the strategies that were identified in that study, so that we didn't just point out a problem and we actually brought solutions to the table. We were created and launched last August, and our board of directors includes investors into our organization, including philanthropic, as well as philanthropic partners and other folks with development experience. So do you want me to list out the entire board and the committee?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty small number, if you don't mind.
Sure. I just hope I don't miss anybody. I should have brought that with me. It's Susie Buffett. I also have Carrie Sanchez. We have Donna Cush from the Omaha Community Foundation, Gail Grave, Todd Heastand, Keith Station from the City of Omaha, as well as Colette Logier as board members. And then in terms of our review committee, Greg Pechek from the city is the new affordable housing manager from the planning department that will be representing the city on the committee, as well as Keith Station from the mayor's office. And then we have Colette Logier, we have Aaron Bach, we have Todd Heastand, and then the Front Porch staff. So it's myself as executive director. We have Naomi Hadaway, Eva Roberts, and Tess Hauser. Thank you.
It's pretty good off the top of your head. So I think the reason I asked you that question is I think it's important for folks to know, because this is $60 million and it's a partnership.
Absolutely.
And I think it's important for people, for transparency reasons, to know who is Front Porch and why are they here, and then who's the decision-making committee.
Absolutely.
And to know that there are city partners on that committee and also community partners on that committee, right? A rotating community representative.
Yes, thank you for reminding me. So in terms of the awards review committee, we have a rotating community member who works in the area of community development, and in this next cycle, Angel Starks from Spark will actually be the representative and has a deep background in real estate.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And then just briefly, the folks that were on Zoom from the Impact Development Fund, they are underwriters, but they are also in part of this partnership because they're helping to track what is a pretty complex financial formula, right? And the reporting parts of this and the loan aspects and the reloan aspects and all of that, how that's all going to be tallied up and how that's going to work well, right?
Correct. Impact Development Fund has been around for over 40 years. They're a CDFI, Community Development Finance Institution. They are located in Colorado, but we partner with them and they do all of the loan underwriting as well as then the servicing of the loan, the monitoring, and the reporting. So they have an organizational system that is created to do that, and they have again, the depth of experience that we hadn't found anywhere else in the country to be able to provide the types of loans that we'd like to provide over the broad array of loans, as well as looking at individual applications for underwriting on an individual by individual basis and not in sort of a typical way where risk might be assessed by only the history of an organization. It's being able to look a little bit more deeply about the organization financials, their mission and their vision, and not always. I think a lot of times we think it's a brand new developer that automatically makes someone really risky, and Front Porch actually wants to be able to support new and emerging developers, like folks that come out of the Developers Academy from Spark and others who want to participate in helping to build their community. Mm-hmm. So it was really important to us in the way that they have a history of kind of working more holistically in their processes to include them as partners.
To perhaps make loans where others might not make them, right? Which is
Yep,
part of the
we're
point.
willing to take a risk sometimes where a traditional financial institution might not be able to. And again, that's the reason for having the loan loss reserve as well, so that we can take risks on small and emerging developers. And we already talked about that earlier today in council, but it's really important that we're supporting new faces in our development community.
I agree with that. And from an ARPA perspective, the city's ARPA funds, if this is approved, are appropriated and spent. So when you're then dealing with a reloan process, 2 or 3 years down the line, that is something those folks help track for you. But from a city perspective, those funds have been appropriated, right?
Absolutely. So once the loans come back in, because again, for the ARPA funding specifically, we'll only use that for the short-term loans. So 24 months in length is the longest term for the ARPA-related funding. That's why it's important to bring the public and private together, because it allows us to offer the full spectrum of loan products, but keeping each funding source separate, and so making certain that the ARPA funding is limited to the 24 months. When that funding comes back in, it'll be pushed out a second time in the form of grants, again, to things like construction projects or any type of programming that could be completed within a year, so that we still have all of the phases of projects, all of the programming, everything is completed by that December 31st, 2026 guideline.
Great.
Really is a great partnership because, again, of being able to maximize the funding use by using it twice, kind of a creative way to approach that.
Yes. So only 2 more questions for you.
Sure.
What does success look like in your mind with this $60 million allocation?
Well, it's 40, so we'll keep it to 40.
Sure.
Try to add
We hope it'll be 60
extra
short.
20 million that I don't have yet.
Yeah.
But what I would say was this with the 40 million, again, we want to maximize the number of units created or the number of folks that we get into homeownership, yes. But beyond just the number of households served, we really, again, believe it's important what types of projects are getting supported, who's a part of that, who's building the projects, who's benefiting from those projects. And so if we are successful, what I see is that we have been good stewards of an investment and partnership between both the private funding and the public funding, and we've shown that in working together, we can create more and more innovative approaches to housing our community, but also that a more diverse group of folks are a part of that development and in the wealth creation that comes from developing housing I would also say that success would include that more families have access to housing, and in just increasing the number of units we are able to produce every year, we're lowering the cost of housing for everyone. That's the goal, right?
And is there a number of units associated with your goals too?
So we have estimates that again are associated with each of these categories. I will say, the initial estimate that we gave was no less than 1,000 households that would be served. I will tell you, with the $7.3 million worth of funding that Front Porch was able to allocate in our first round, we saw over more than 770 units of housing could be created. So I think that the 1,000 unit goal is it's a low bar, to be honest with you. And so I hesitate to associate a number because I believe that we will serve many, many more households.
I see this as a major step forward, but when we talked about this in planning committee this morning a little bit too, that the need is so great, it can be a little daunting, but you got to start somewhere. And that comment also applies to the city's affordable housing strategy that's underway today that we all had briefings on, and I know you're involved in that too. In many respects, you're much further along than that study is at this point. But what I hope does come out of that study is similar findings to what you're describing, but also some policy recommendations too that we can all pursue.
Absolutely. We'd love to see policy that supports the work that we all know needs to be done. I think all of us agree. I've had many conversations with all of you that there's a need for more affordable housing. There are a lot of approaches. If there was one way to fix it, we would have already done it. And so it's going to take all of us working together, and that policy piece will come back and support those efforts and that vision for all of us. So absolutely, looking forward to that.
Great. Thanks for your work on this. No further lights. Next item.
Item 91, an ordinance to approve the expenditure of coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds for premium pay in the amount up to $3,000 for each city employee is amendment of the whole requested by the law department.
Public hearing on number 91 is today. Proponents, please. Mr. Indenbosch.
Thank you, Bernard Indenbosch, Deputy City Attorney, and I'll just make a presentation and then happy to answer any questions. As most of you know, ARPA provides that funds can be used. The ARPA funds could be used to provide pay to essential workers that supported the community through the public health emergency that we obviously were arguably still in the midst of. And that definition talks about employees that helped maintain the continuity of operations of critical city functions and infrastructure. And I wanted to point that out because that continuity of operations language makes it clear that it's something more than just necessarily public safety people, which is obviously the first people that would come to mind. In this particular regard, the city was approached by its three largest unions, the Omaha Police Officers Association, the Omaha Professional Firefighters Local 385, and the Civilian Employees Local 251, who all made requests to the mayor to receive premium pay from a portion of the city's ARPA funds. And after consideration of those requests, the mayor's office made a decision that they would go ahead with that recommendation. Now, one of the initial things, and I know we discussed it this morning, has to do with, obviously, we're a couple years into the case and the potential of being able to award compensation for work done in the past. And the prohibition, unfortunately, that we face appears in Article 3, Section 19 of the Nebraska Constitution, which provides that you can't provide extra compensation for services that were rendered previously. And that ends up being an impediment. And I appreciate there are some people, even though most of the employees that are employed now were employed then, there has been some turnover. And this particular process doesn't necessarily recognize people who have been in the past. And that's the reality, but that's a result of the constitutional prohibition that's in there. So the decision was made to award $3,000 per employee. There were two different mechanisms that could have been used. You could consider a lump sum payment, or ultimately what was decided here was to provide a $10 premium per hour for employees who work, and the requirement to be at work as opposed to working remotely is a requirement that appears in the regulations that are promulgated by the Department of the Treasury. And the decision to move in that manner was in part administrative, much easier for us to do all the extensive reporting that's required by the Department of the Treasury, and secondly, some of the impediments caused by our payroll system and the programming that needs to occur to make this occur. Now, one of the things that was addressed was we needed to enter into memorandums of understandings with the various bargaining group. You have attached to the original ordinance 7 memorandums of understandings that address all 7 bargaining groups that the city is obligated to negotiate with. You will see by reviewing those that this particular payment is non-pensionable, so these earnings will not only does the employee not pay pension contributions, the city won't pay pension contributions, but more importantly, it won't impact an employee's pension. It won't have a negative impact potentially on the pension system by providing a benefit that wasn't fully funded historically. Assuming that you approve this next week, and obviously that's assumption, this would go in effect for pay periods starting July 24th of 2022 through November 12th of 2022. That's 8 pay periods. There's potential for 640 hours for somebody to work in that pay period. The reason we chose such a large period is to account. There's going to be some people that are on vacation. There may be people that are unable to work. Some of that was in discussions with the leadership of the Omaha Professional Firefighters Association, where they were worried with too small a time period, there wouldn't be a sufficient number of time to make sure that each of their members received the full benefit. So that's the time period that's there. There's roughly 2,750 full-time employees that will receive the benefit, presuming, of course, that the council approves this particular expenditure of ARPA funds. The amendment of the whole that's before you expands those who are eligible to receive it to part-time and seasonal employees. Part-time and seasonal employees who work during the applicable time period would be capped at $1,500, again at $10 per hour. There are currently, I asked HR today for the number, there are currently 750 part-time employees and just under 250 seasonal employees, so that adds another 1,000 employees that would potentially be affected by the premium pay. So that's how it works. We feel comfortable based on the guidance from the Treasury, the feedback that we've received from Deloitte Touche, who's our hired contractor, that this is permissible under the ARPA guidelines. We negotiated with each of the bargaining groups. Certainly, some wanted more, but for the most part, I think the bargaining groups are appreciative that the mayor and hopefully the city council will recognize the efforts that they made during the time and some of the inconveniences that obviously affected people and continue to affect people, quite frankly. So anyway, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Other proponents today? Mr. Towie.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the council. My name is Trevor Towie. I'm the president of Omaha Professional Firefighters, 6005 Grover Street. I'm here to voice my appreciation of this resolution and ultimately ask for your support. It's easy to tell by sitting in this room today that you're often tasked with the role of appropriating money for assets important to Omaha. You've approved money for land, buildings, libraries today, special projects, safety equipment. You approved some money for fire trucks recently, so I appreciate that very much. But this resolution, I feel, is an opportunity to invest in what's I feel is the most important asset that Omaha has, and that's its workers. During the pandemic, the term essential worker was used quite often. And as an advocate for workers, I appreciate the recognition for them. And I appreciate all the work that was done in the city of Omaha to keep it functioning as a taxpayer of Omaha. But I felt I should take this opportunity to talk about the work that the firefighters and paramedics, my members, your employees did during that pandemic. Because as we all know, during that pandemic, my members didn't have the opportunity to work remotely. And there was no opportunity for them to be socially distant. There wasn't a shutdown. We worked and came to work every single day. We responded to every single 911 request that there was in the city of Omaha. And during that time, those members continued to provide life-saving interventions to thousands of Omaha's sickest COVID patients. And that's why I think this resolution is important. I don't see it as a gift. I don't see it as a reward. I see it as it's a benefit that's been earned multiple times over by the members that I represent and by all the essential employees. This is certainly the definition, the work that my members provide is the definition of an essential employee. And so I appreciate your support, your consideration on this resolution. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And thank you for your service. Any other proponents today? I will note that we have a letter of support from Local 251 that came today too for the public record. Any opponents today? Seeing none, public hearings closed. Mr. Bagley, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. I talk a lot about the dignity of workers, and this item number 91 here for compensation, as Mr. Towie did a great job of articulating what his members did for our community, the Omaha Police, Public Works, civilians. When a lot of us were not in the fire, so to speak, with dealing with COVID patients. And back a couple years ago when that started, it was an unknown kind of thing. The whole world was kind of turned upside down, but our employees of the city of Omaha, the Omaha firefighters, police, Local 251 members, and even the part-timers, they stepped up and filled that void when it was needed the most. So I'm glad to offer my support for this coming up next week, but I appreciate the comments Mr. Towie made today. And Council President Festerson mentioned the letter from Local 251 that we don't forget the dignity of the work that people did in the city of Omaha. And I appreciate that I wish it was more, but I think it's a fair recognition of the workers that got us through those trying times during COVID. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Palermo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I want to thank the mayor for her work on this because, as we heard, it's different employees through the city had different jobs to fulfill, and they all did their jobs, including our staff, our city clerks. Everybody that shows up to the city and does their job makes the city stay open and keeps their lights on. So she had a very difficult decision because public safety is a big part of our budget. We know the work that took place between the police and the firefighters. Being on the Public Safety Committee, we know the changes the firefighters had to go through with donning equipment, sending one person in for the safety of all members. Of course, when you go back, you're still around other people, but it's really hard to ever determine who did more or, with this money that's there. So ultimately, the mayor made the decision that every single city employee, regardless of what bargaining unit they were a part of, would receive this. And I thank her for that because that's a tough decision to make. If it came before me, honestly, I wouldn't have picked one bargaining group. I would have only been in favor with the way it's presented in front of us for everybody in the city. That is the absolute fairest way to do it. I do have a little heartburn that those who are not with the city now aren't a part of this. They kept our city open and operating as well, but that's the way it is, and that's how we move forward. There's also some parts of this too where we have city employees who actually receiving this money will not be a benefit to them. And I haven't heard the part of opting out because, believe it or not, there are people that work for the city that once they make a certain amount of income, they lose the benefits they need to survive, whether it's health insurance or the housing they have. So Bernard's coming back up. I'd love to hear that opt-out part because I missed that earlier.
Yeah, and that issue really didn't necessarily come up until we got to the point where we were talking about having part-timers come back and the potential to meet or exceed certain earning levels that might affect their Medicare or other insurance. And so the discussion with payroll and human resources is obviously there shouldn't be any problem with people opting out. So we've set up a process where people can. We'll try to make sure that's communicated in the communications to people that they have that ability. That merely they need to inform the human resources and the payroll department that they do not want to participate, and they do in that instance. They will not be obligated to participate in this process. We certainly don't want to, in an effort to acknowledge the work that people did, have a negative effect on any person at all. That's obviously counter to what this is intended to do from the very outset.
Okay, I appreciate you saying that. That means a lot, especially to those folks that work for the city that it's not a benefit to them. And the other part of it too is this is a blessing in disguise, the way I see it, for the HR department. If you can't attract and lure employees for the openings we have within the city of Omaha from the dates of July to November with ultimately $10 more per hour for the open spots we have, I don't know that you're ever going to get anybody. I mean, let's think about it. These spots that we have, especially the entry-level jobs, after July 24th, they will come with $10 more per hour. I'm going to be scratching my head come November if these spots aren't almost 100% filled. Not that they ever can be 100%, but if they're not, what more could we possibly do as a city? And that's a side note, but that's the way I look at this as well. I mean, for a new employee starting out where they see that wage that they may begin at, and all of a sudden it's, oh, hey, by the way, you're going to get $10 more per hour, up to $3,000, of course. That's a huge benefit to help with the shortage we have across the board in all departments that we need help in. So again, I want to thank the mayor. I want to thank the bargaining groups who came together with being part of this, and Mr. Endenbosch as well for seeing this through. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Melton, you're recognized.
Yes, for anyone who's still watching, I just want to remind everyone that even with the addition of the part-timers, all elected officials are excluded from this. Neither the mayor nor any of us sitting here will be receiving any additional money. Just a reminder so that when we vote, I want to make there's no self-serving votes here.
Thank you. I was going to mention that too. I think that doesn't.
That is accurate.
And I also appreciate the point Councilmember Palermo just made. While it's a discouraging conversation to have with someone that they can't receive this premium pay due to Medicaid cliff effects, we do want to make sure we have a process so no one is put in a bad position around it, and it sounds like we do. So I look forward to supporting the amendment of the whole next week too. No further lights. Next item.
Item 92, an ordinance to approve a real estate purchase and sale agreement with Civic Corner LLC for a redevelopment site located northeast of 19th and Capitol Streets for approximately $1,524,600.
Public hearing on number 92 is today. Proponents, please.
Good evening. Jay Klein, representing White Lotus Group, 2036 North 48th Avenue. I'm here to answer any questions, but I'm happy to give a short narrative overview of the project if that would be helpful to the council members.
Sure. How about a short one?
I know we're at the very end. So the Civic Auditorium site, as you know, is a 9-acre parcel of land located on 19th and Capitol, and the site includes a parking structure with 454 parking stalls that the city will retain. The project area for Civic Corner, outlined in the purchase and sale agreement, is roughly 7 acres, including rights of way. And our vision is a mixed-use, largely multifamily, mixed-income development that aims to create a friendly and inclusive lifestyle environment catered to a younger urban population that wants to live and work in the city. Some of the outline details are 250 to 300 market rate apartments, 100 to 140 affordable units, and the average AMI is about 60%. Retail and office on the main level, and 20 to 25 townhouses for sale. The remaining acre of land is being reserved for future potential civic or commercial use. I'd also like to note that due to the more recent announcements regarding the significant reinvestments in the urban core, mostly the streetcar, we are looking into potentially increasing the scale of our plans in order to make an even larger impact to the site. We've been in discussions with multiple development partners, some of them national, and we anticipate working alongside with them as we redevelop the site. One such partner is Front Porch Investments, so it's pretty timely that we got to hear from Meredith earlier. And based on this project concept that we outlined, we applied for and were awarded funding through their innovation round. This funding will help ensure more highly amenitized affordable housing on the site. This is not only very exciting news for us, but it also validates the need and our approach towards providing more affordable housing in the urban core. If you have any other questions about the project, I'll be around to answer them.
Thank you. Other proponents, Mr. Anderson.
Troy Anderson, Mayor's Office, 1819 Farnham Street, here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents?
Donnie Johnson, 4928 North 52nd Street, Omaha, Nebraska. The Johnson Equestrian Foundation, North Omaha Concerned Citizen Foundation. I think what these young men are trying to do, when my son was attending Creighton University playing basketball for Dana Altman, I studied that corner. I like to claim that corner for eminent domain because Walmart wants to put some things there. So we've been trying our best to negotiate that corner, and these young men are doing a good job. But then, as I look at this whole process, I was wanting to share this with the city council because I was watching Wagon Train last night. And this guy, he had a wagon, but he didn't have no horse. So the wagon train was going to take off. Is that the same as putting a cart before the horse? Because we need a Walmart downtown. We've been trying to get that done. But if these young men have the money, if they don't have the money, or if they're going to be subsidizing the money with taxpayers' money, I suggest we claim it at eminent domain and put a Walmart supercenter there, which I've been negotiating with Walmart, and they said the land is too high for them at this point, but we can claim it in a different direction. So in the meantime, does that make sense to put the cart before the horse, or should we just continue building houses, no jobs, and they're gonna lose the property anyway because they can't pay for it? So what should we do? Get the job first or the house first? That's been all. In fact, one of the development out west, I asked them, why don't y'all put the streets in first and then the house? It's a big argument, big debate. But should we build more houses or should we look for the jobs? Or does that make sense? Put the heart, how does that go? You're supposed to be a highly intelligent Mr. Frederickson and a scholar. You should figure this out for us. And thank you.
Thank you. Any other opponents today? Seeing none, public hearings closed. Ms. Johnson, you're recognized.
Yes, this question is for, pardon me?
For Jay? For me?
Jay,
Yeah.
yes. Hey, Jay, you know, you probably kind of have some idea where my questions are going to come from, and they're going to speak and piggyback on what Mr. Johnson has said over and over again regarding jobs. How will we ensure jobs are going to be in great demand and that the construction work is going to be completed by those in Omaha, and the underserved community is going to have an opportunity to gain that work? Or do we have any strategies in place to do that?
Well, we're a little bit early before we get to the construction part of this particular project, but based off of our past experience, when we have gone through the construction stage of a project, we put that project out to bid just like everything else. When we hire a contractor, it's their responsibility to ensure that all subcontractors that they hire, that they had gone through a process where they advertised it in a way that was reasonably accessible to all subcontractors, and so I would expect that they would adhere to those requirements.
All right, and then finally, how will we not outprice individuals out of the area due to the fact that maybe their income is $15,000 annually?
Are we referring to the affordable housing that we're proposing? Well, you know, our goal is to meet an average of 60% AMI. And so that means that we anticipate some of the individuals that would be potentially living in the affordable units could be less than that, and some could be more. But our target is 60%. And so as far as, you know, whether or not we're being able to create housing for individuals that are, you know, $15,000 a year, you know, that's a question that I can't answer right now.
Would you entertain that discussion at a later time, or would you consider that in your process as you develop this area? I mean, help me out here, because my community is concerned about all of this new development coming along, and the word redlining, gentrification, and all these kinds of things come up over and over again.
I would entertain any discussion regarding that.
Mr. Anderson?
Sorry, those were really good questions, and I thought I'd maybe chime in. Just differentiating between kind of what the developer is bringing to the table and ultimately perhaps what the city's trying to accomplish with the land that is currently under the ownership of the city. So number one, you had talked about jobs, right? Mm-hmm. So wanted to maybe provide a little bit of color here, right? We've been trying to chase jobs in the downtown urban core for the better part of 2 decades, right? And it didn't work. In fact, we have actually been very attentive. We've been involved in a number of national searches to draw and attract very large employers to our urban core. And you know what we heard was, you have a lot of really exciting things going on downtown, and you've got a lot of really, but you don't have the people. You don't have a workforce downtown that we can employ. So over the last couple of years, we've sort of done a 180-degree turn, right? And we've said, okay, we hear you, right? Let's get people and talent downtown, and the jobs will come, is what we've been told from employers. So in response to the questions around like the Walmarts and stuff like that, you know, we've been talking to grocers. I've been talking to grocers for better part of 2 decades, right? And part of the response that they come back is you don't have the foot traffic, you don't have the vehicular traffic, you don't have the demographics, and so that's where we've switched, right? So it's while we know and understand there's a need for jobs, we need the people first, right? So that's why you've seen a real concentrated effort over the last couple of years. And there's been a number of really successful projects that we can point to about adding density and adding residential opportunity. Okay, so then you asked about the question around how do we, well, you heard it from the front porch folks just a few minutes ago, right? It's somewhat of a really easy macroeconomic. The more supply you create, the demand goes down and the lower cost for housing comes down. So we are feverishly trying to bring as much residential density, as many residential options. You hear about all the efforts around missing middle housing that we're trying to bring to not only the urban core, but to the city as a whole. So I think that's kind of where the developer comes in. We have city-owned land, right? And the city-owned land has sat vacant for years. In fact, the previous development pursuit somewhat floundered because there was a job, an employer that didn't materialize, right? These folks do a great job with housing, and we are really excited about the opportunity that these folks bring to the table to help us bring a much needed asset, you heard from folks, which are people, to our urban core and to our city.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Mr. Harding, you're recognized.
Thank you. I was just going to say that this is a very good discussion, very important discussion to be having, but as it relates to this agenda item, not relevant. I mean, we're talking about a real estate purchase. What the developer does with it and how it happens is a later discussion. Very important to have, but I just wanted to make sure we kept it on subject here.
Mr. Palermo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Anderson, you only got a few short meetings left, so I'm trying to think of questions for you here. And maybe Mr. Fanslaw could weigh in as well. So as far as you can remember about this corner of property that we have in front of us today for a sale agreement, which I'm really happy White Lotus is going to invest in this because I feel they're invested in the community to make this another great project. I mean, everything we have in front of us is a great project right now. I don't know how else to say it. But how many times have you been a part of this lot almost being sold to somebody?
So this is the second sort of formal, I mean, we've gotten folks that have approached us and, you know, maybe want to buy the property and sit on it. And I mean, but this is the second, and as I kind of mentioned, this was sort of a 180 approach to maybe the original. So this is my second go round in 4.5 years. So
it's a great project. It might be even worth you sticking around for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. And I would just add that we had a conversation earlier, Shirley, about that this is a land purchase. That's what this item is.
Yes.
And there'll be much more to come later in terms of details about what you're intending to do. But I appreciated the update because there has been lots of starts and stops on this one. And it's a very important property downtown. And so my two questions, or maybe three short questions, were about the purchase price, which is fair value, not market value, right? But I think that is consistent with community development law because they are pursuing the affordable housing aspect of this, which I appreciate. And we had a long conversation about earlier today. That'd be the reason why the mayor's office has negotiated the fair market price versus the actual, or fair value price versus the actual market price, right?
That's correct, yeah. Under the community development law, you know, there's a community need, which we have spent a fair amount of time around affordable housing. Yes, there is a community need associated with the transaction, this real estate transaction, and because of that, we can look at the fair market value versus perhaps the appraised or market value.
And that can also be enforced, right? I mean, I think Jay talked about 130 or 40 maybe affordable housing units, but that'll be part of the agreement, right? To get this purchase price?
Yep.
And in terms of the timeline, there is a clawback provision in here. Should that not work out for whatever reason, you know, given some of the history here with a previous developer, that if for whatever reason it doesn't work out, the city can buy this property back at that same price. I think the date is, if things aren't moving forward by the end of 2022 and they aren't closing or actually working on construction by the next year or two, right?
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah. So that's your general timeline then, right, Jay, to actually have construction?
Yes.
Obviously?
Yep. Yes.
All right, thank you. Ms. Johnson, you're recognized.
Well, I just wanted to say, since I'm a logical person, and I look at facts, and I make my decisions based upon the end being in mind. So those questions that I asked, very important for me to make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. No further lights. Appreciate you being here. Thanks for sticking with us.
Thank you.
We do have a motion needed by Councilmember Bagley before we close here.
President, I make a motion to set the public hearing on item number 116 for August the 2nd.
There's a motion and a second, and the reason for that is to align that with public hearings on that item on different items that are coming on the agenda. Motion and a second, roll call.
Johnson.
Yes.
Melton. Palermo.
Yes.
Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Second, roll call.
Okay, hang on. Johnson.
Yes.
Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Meeting is adjourned at 5:40.